Yeah, 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 yeah. Bronx on the scene, nose to the ground, reads every scratch, every step, every sound. Dust on the boot, mud on the cuff, one wrong move and he calls you bluff. He found a lie in the turn of a face, found a fresh print in an empty place. Tail up high when the story won't blend, he don't bark loud, he just gets close. Damn, sniffing out facts, no room for slack. Truth in the crack, now we don't look back. BronxTails, 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 chasing truth through the rails. BronxTails, 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 corruption slips then fails, sniffing out facts, uncaging the truth. Corruption on a tight leash, and he's pulling it loose. Hey, hey. Idaho nights cold, over the floor, 4 names heavy in the whole town, so Bronx in the weeds where the silence stayed, digging for proof in the tracks it made. He found the gap in the masked up tail, found the bent clue in the buried trail. Bone white truth in the folder stack, one clean scent in the case swings back. Sniffing out facts, no room for slack. Truth in the crack, now we don't look back. BronxTails, 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 chasing truth through the rails. BronxTails, 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 corruption slips then fails, sniffing out facts, uncaging the truth. Corruption on a tight leash, and he's pulling it loose. One paw print, one torn thread, one false alibi, falls dead. Chasing truth through the rails. BronxTails, 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 corruption slips then fails, sniffing out facts, uncaging the truth. Corruption on a tight leash, and he's pulling it loose.
I'm small again. What the heck? Well, I don't know why it keeps doing that. That's so strange. I'm not sure I like this light either. Maybe I should change it. Let's see. Oh, that's blue. That's kind of fun though. Okay, happy Tuesday. I know we are not usually live on Tuesdays, but again, I have today off work, so I figured I would use my time wisely and do what I love to do. So, a couple of things before we get started. First of all, hello, everybody. How are you? I hope everybody's week is starting off wonderful and is just as amazing as you guys are. I want to say hi to Carol and Christina, Bianca, Mikey, Thrive, Four Hens. Who else is in here? Oh, we got Steven and Momos. And I think that's what we're starting off with today. So good to see everybody and everybody who's watching and not in chat. So, hey, Hot Pie, good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, yes. You know, he's a little arrogant. He's a little full of himself, but his answers gave us so much of the information that we've been craving to get. And it seems like, you know, in this interview, there were so many things to catch that he said. And there's a couple of little things that I think he was giving us a hint of, but he couldn't actually say. And so it's fun to see different creators pick out some of those little things and, you know, just grab onto them and apply them where they need to be applied. So yeah, this was a great interview. His attitude kind of annoyed me, but I kind of don't give a crap because he gave us the information, a lot of information. And we know that there's so much more that he couldn't speak on that I think will eventually come out, whether it's from somebody like himself that does an interview that's able to talk, or whether we find it ourselves just on the little hints that they drop in the interviews. We will find them. They will come out. Hello, good to see you. Hey, Mark and Betty, good to see you. So, yeah, we're going to go over the Dr. Turvey interview, but then I want to kind of just do a live dig on a bunch of pictures. So, we can see kind of what he's talking about, where he's talking about. And I personally have never paid a lot of attention to the spare room. And apparently, to him, for reasons we don't quite know yet, that's a very important room. So we will get to that. Hey, just Jackie, good to see you. So, yeah, we will get to everything. No worries. I have a couple of things I want to say first. As you guys know, everything is alleged and our opinion only. I spoke to Amber over in Moscow today. I wanted to check on the Eric Gower ring camera footage because it seems like I paid for it quite a while ago and it's a 20-minute video. I'm assuming they're just giving us when he pulls in, when he pulls out, the times and what he's driving type of thing. So that's interesting. I'm interested, like, what he was wearing, the shoes on his feet, things like that I'm interested in. So she said they are in the very end stages of it. So we should get it literally any minute. I also, yes, thank you so much, Carol. We appreciate you very much. Brian needs a new lawyer. And I often wish over and over that we could go back to the beginning of this and see what would have happened had he had a paid attorney. Could you imagine if he had somebody like a Jose Baez? I mean, he's a freaking asshole, but he does a great job at what he does. Could you imagine the holes that somebody like Jose Baez or what's the lady in Chicago that worked on the Stephen Avery case? Kathy something, I can't remember. Somebody like her, holy moly, we'd be sitting in a completely different situation. And to be frank, I don't think we'd all be sitting here talking about it because it would have had a completely different outcome. So, yeah, Zellner, thank you. Absolutely. Hey, you're good. Reading my dang mind. Not many people know of her. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. I'm glad you guys know of her. She's pretty close to me, so it's cool to see her on different cases and how incredible she is at picking out these cases. Good to see you, DKM and April. If Brian had money for attorneys, they never would have brought charges against him. They know how to do this. Absolutely. And now that we know quite a bit more information regarding Ann Taylor, I went into this interview kind of with a grain of salt of what he was talking about with Ann Taylor because he's obviously has a grudge against her. I feel rightfully so. So I was kind of like, well, he's got a grudge against her, so he's obviously not going to show both sides of the table with her specifically, but I also don't think he's wrong either. So that's sad. It's really, really sad. On topics, starting the show off with a bang. Good to see you. Or on topics. On topics. You have to let us know which one it is. Or leave it a secret. And I'll just say both of them every time. Good to see you. All right. So yes, talk to Amber today. Eric Gower's ring cam should be coming in any minute. And Mason Barstow is completely paid for. So we'll be getting that soon as well. I also sent in another FOIA last night, and I also apologized to them for being so annoying because I send so many of them. And I sent in a request, what we talked about yesterday with the ATF agent. And he said that, he was with a cadet or talking to a cadet, and then he walked in the house and everyone was double tapped. But then we found out in document 265 that Officer Jay Waters had a video saved from his body cam or in his body cam folder stating that somebody drove two cadets in a Moscow vehicle to the Kibbe Dome and then returned the patrol car. And he said, it wasn't me. So I FOIA'd that, whether it's the video itself, the dash cam, whatever we can get from it. I FOIA'd that too, just to see kind of like what is going on here. So How much do they charge for which one? The Mason Barstow is a very long interview. So as you know, we pay for the redactions. That one was just under 312. And then Eric Gower's was around 150-ish, I believe, if I can remember. I think that one was paid for about a month ago. So it's been a while. We still have more that we've gotten prices for. I just think the ones that we've paid for so far are the probably top priority compared to the other ones. So we're just going to keep FOIA. I'm, sending in FOIAs. I'm waiting on a whole bunch of results to see if we can get prices or not. I am really shocked. When I sent in the Eric Gower FOIA, I was like, there's no way we're going to get this. I'm just going to try for shits and gigs. And I'm shocked that we actually got it. I don't know how that one was not covered under the privacy. It seems like they pick and choose who's under this privacy, and it seems to be related to the roommates the most. So I think that's very interesting. Hey, Lizzie. Lizzie got a brand new car today, a brand new 2026 vehicle. So congratulations to Lizzie on her brand new car. I think it's beautiful, and we all need to support each other and be positive in each other's lives. So congratulations to your brand new car. You got a brand new car. Come on down. You're the next contestant on okay. So let's get into this interview, and then we will go over tons. Oh, nope. You know what? Before I do that, I want to share a picture with you just to set the record so straight. So straight. There is a picture floating around. Let me share. Let me make it bigger. Anybody who's, hi, Kimmy, good to see you. Your live was great today, by the way. Anybody who sees this picture, please understand that this is absolutely fake. This is 100% fake. If you notice down in the bottom left-hand corner, it says edit. This is a screenshot of the 12:28 a.m. Linda Lane footage that people are debating if it's Ethan or not. And this was a screenshot that was put into ChatGPT. That's the edit down here at the bottom. That's from ChatGPT. And apparently there was just supposed to be a color or light overlay on it to show what it would look like in the daytime. However, when you put a picture in a ChatGPT, I do it constantly, making pictures, it changes the entire photo, including what the people look like in there. So please know this is not real. These are not the real people. This is fake. This is edited. This is AI, and this is changed and altered 1000%, not just the light. The people are altered as well. So, yeah, and that's what I thought too, but I've seen a lot of people that have thought that it's actually real. And I just want to make sure. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. It does. It changes everything. It really will. Things you don't even notice. It'll add like an extra finger on a person or something super random. But yes, just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. That's all. All right. So let's go over. Okay. Let's go over this interview. I did put it up to 130 speed, so we don't have to sit super tight for the whole thing. It'll go faster. All right, let's get it started. Let's go. Oh, 1 second before I do that. This has been really finicky lately, and I just want to make sure the volume is good. Okay. Now we got it. Let's go. Let's go.
Response. So let's start there.
Well, let's start with what she said. I mean, I think that's a fair place. My response comes after her public sort of admonition. And it, for me, it's kind of, par for the course with that team, subsequent to the revelation of the plea agreement. How do I put this? I think I am fairly shocked, as is, I think, the world, that a defense attorney would come out publicly and admonish one of their own experts for discussing exculpatory evidence for their client, and it begs the question as to whether or not she's representing Coburger or something else. So because that's not in his best.
I'm trying not to stop it superly at everything he says. But I do think this is so important. So many people have questioned, hey, good spiraling. Good to see you, my dear. So many people questioned Ann Taylor from the beginning. And I thought that something or somebody was stopping her from completely doing her job correctly. And I thought that person was Hippler. But it seems like even Dr. Turvey seems to think that Hippler was kind of like, girl, what are you doing? Like, you're not even defending your client. This is ridiculous. And if you're going to sit in my courtroom and play games, then I'm going to make this go really quick. I'm going to just deny every little dumb thing that you're trying to do because you're not even in here really trying to get the facts or the big problems that are glaringly big in this case. She's not fighting them. So what is actually going on here? So now I question Hippler's stance in this. And Dr. Turvey says some things along those lines as well. We all questioned Ann Taylor. What was she doing? What was she trying to get at? Sometimes some of her questions and statements were like, what are you trying to get at here? Like, we don't understand. Now that we know that there are so many bigger things she could have been touching on and getting to and screaming about, and she was not touching on them at all. What was she just hoping it would come up in trial? Like, I don't know what her plan was, but it looks kind of fishy now. I'm curious what her motive was now.
Best interests. His best interests obviously are served by full disclosure of all exculpatory evidence and testing of all potentially exculpatory evidence, and that's all any expert should be, advocating for. If you're advocating for truth and justice and full disclosure and transparency, which are sort of the hallmarks of good scientific practice, that's what you're advocating for. And when you hire somebody like me, that's what you're saying to the world. Hey, we're bringing in independent experts who are independent, who are going to give us advice about what evidence exists and what evidence does not exist, what evidence should be tested, and what evidence might be beneficial to understanding the full narrative of the case. And the idea that you would leave physical evidence untested that has potential exculpatory value is shocking. It shocks the conscience. And so the idea that you would admonish somebody for saying, hey, there's this really important piece of untested evidence that we need to talk about, it's sort of, again, it's problematic, and it raises real questions for me. But let me explain something else.
I'm going to address what Christina said. I do have to agree. Yes, people pay to have their comments read. I do understand both sides of it, and the fact that you don't want to stop Dr. Turvey from, speaking or interrupt him at all. And I know they probably had some questions, but I felt like a lot of the questions that were paid for to be asked were sometimes better questions than what they did ask or what they ended up asking. The community, I mean, it's really important, especially when you have a guest, to pay attention to questions in the chat, because a lot of times the questions in the chat are much better than what we have had planned to ask, and they need to be addressed. So I do agree. I do agree.
Let's flip it and say it this way. What would it say about an expert that you hired who sat on exculpatory evidence and didn't say anything publicly, and later on that evidence was discovered and tested and exculpated a client or a defendant? What would you say about the entire team of experts that said nothing and sat blithely by while the judicial machine sort of steamrolled the defendant?
I would not think very highly of them.
What?
I would not think very highly of them at all.
Exactly. So while in this moment there are people who are chagrined by this discussion of publicly available material, I am more concerned about those who would rather suppress it.
And is it safe to say, Dr. Turvey, that this is the first time a defense attorney in a case that you've worked on has come out and made such a statement?
I've never seen it before in any case, ever, in my 30-year history. I mean, if you can name that case, I'd love to know.
No,
he's saying across the board, ever in the history of the United States, from the time he's been doing what he's doing and in his position and working cases, he has never, not his case, not anybody's case, ever seen something like what Ann Taylor did in putting out that press release, however, never spoke regarding her defense on Bryan Kohberger, never spoke about Bryan Kohberger, never came out and publicly defended Bryan Kohberger other than in the courtroom, sort of like she was supposed to, sort of, right? So the fact that he says, I have never seen that, should tell us all that that was highly unprofessional by Ann Taylor. And it should make everybody side-eye Ann Taylor.
Experts for the state and for the defense who've come out and made massive blunders, massive errors, massive failure to disclose misconduct, incorrect interpretations, looking at photographs upside down and interpreting them incorrectly. That happens all the time. And you never see a defense attorney coming out and blasting them for it. Or even the state often might do it a little bit, but not the defense, not their own expert. So it really starts to beg the question, what is the purpose of hiding this evidence? What is the purpose of not wanting to discuss it? And to be very clear, the sort of the admonishment is generic. It's only that I'm discussing things, not that I'm wrong, not that I'm lying, not that I'm incompetent, not that I am biased, or not that I am doing.
That was huge for me, that he's speaking, not that he's wrong. That was huge for me.
Doing something that violates a court order. None of that is happening. If it were true that I were violating her confidentiality agreement, there would be severe and immediate legal consequences, as there should be. All right. The problem is Brady versus Maryland, which is the Supreme Court ruling, which states that you can't you have to disclose everything that is potentially exculpatory, and the person who decides that is not the prosecution nor even the judge necessarily. It's usually, if the judge is going to make that determination, they do it in camera, alone, in their chambers or whatever. But generally, you're supposed to disclose everything that's potentially exculpatory and let the defense do their own investigation of it. So everything that I've discussed has already been disclosed by the state. She's just unhappy that I'm discussing it for some reason, and then put me on blast with the other two attorneys to sort of, I think her attempt was to try to, the last line says it all, which is his credibility should be viewed through this lens or whatever. And I think it should be. I think my credibility should be viewed through that lens, which is, will I knowingly sit on exculpatory evidence? No, I will not. Despite whatever consequences might come. And I have, at any given time, I have between 35 and 40 open cases. I just finished a huge report in a big case today, spent the last 2 weeks working on it. And my clients hire me for that objectivity, for that impartiality, and because they know that I have a reputation for having integrity in front of a jury and in front of the court. And I have to say,
that's huge, is the integrity, right? It's the following the rules that you have for the courtroom, for yourself, for the client, for the case, for everything. And I'll tell you, somebody like Dr. Turvey is not going to do anything to risk his job. I would think Ann Taylor wouldn't either, but Ann Taylor is going to get paid regardless because she is a public defender. She's getting paid from the same bank account as Bill Thompson. So I don't know. Now that we know more on Ann Taylor and kind of the little games or whatever she was doing was kind of crappy and wasn't actually working the things she should have been working. And now that we know that her office is being investigated for the actual leak, which is wild to me. I don't know if she was the leaker or somebody in her office was the leaker or not, but I could possibly see why they would, to maybe try and gain more time to go over the evidence. Doesn't mean that Bill Thompson was doing what he was supposed to do either. Absolutely not. But it's almost like they were playing a game, but they were on the same side, right? Wild.
It really begs the question as to the credibility of those experts or those attorneys or those participants or those commentators who are arguing for the suppression of this evidence. That's interesting to me. But there are no specific, she's made no specific allegations of specific information. And I think I know why that is. So.
And that
it's
was
also interesting that she hasn't spoke up since the, following the plea, which was almost getting close into that year mark. I thought that was interesting. But you're 100% right. She doesn't try to discredit you. She doesn't try to say that you're wrong. She basically just says she's also attacking her own team, which is wild. I mean, that's kind of, you have the whole world trying to attack you for the most part, and you're trying to prove BK's innocence. But hey, let's start attacking our own, which was so
interesting. Think about what it's going to do to her. I mean, remember that she's not like this clean defense attorney. She's got a conflict of interest starting out of the gate because she represented victim family members when she was working for the public defender. But she also has a she worked as a magistrate and a prosecutor, I think, at some point. People who do these things as lawyers, they get confused sometimes about their role. They get confused, and their attitude and their posture doesn't change sufficiently when they change their role or their onus. What is their onus? Is their onus to the defense, to their client, to the state, to the people who elect them, whatever? They get confused. And so
That's funny that he's saying that Ann Taylor, she's played several different roles and is just not adaptable at all. It's funny to me. It's entertaining. I shouldn't say funny because this is not funny. There is somebody who is in prison, and we obviously have 4 people that have lost their lives horrifically, and whoever did this is still roaming free. So it's not funny, but you guys know what I mean, where he's putting these little digs into Ann Taylor, but he's saying them so professionally.
when you have this, we call role strain, when you have multiple roles pulling on you, you can wind up saying and doing things that you probably shouldn't. What I'm also thinking about is any person who would ever think of working as an expert for Ann Taylor in the future is probably going to say no.
I'm not sure if he touches on this, but I do want to address this. V Slim says, I don't understand why Ann agreed not to test the hair that was found in Ethan's hand. That is crazy. I agree that is absolutely crazy, but it is not Ann Taylor's job to prove anything. The burden lies with the state and the prosecution. So Ann doesn't necessarily have to do any of that, nor really should she. However, when you are facing the death penalty, somebody else now is going to lose their life. We clearly know, and she should have clearly known, it wasn't Bryan Kohberger's hair. We've got pictures of him, videos of him. The very next morning, he's not missing any hair, nor was it long enough his hair's not long enough to be the hair in Ethan's hand. So what really would the loss be for her to test that hair? It wouldn't have come back to Bryan, but at all, ever. It would not have come back to Bryan. So her knowing that, I kind of feel like, why wouldn't she test it? Normally you wouldn't test it because what if it does come back to be your client's? And then you would have to present that in court, that it came back to your client. And that's just another thing you'd have to defend. But we know it wasn't going to come back to Bryan Kohberger. So why would she not test it? I get that that's not her position. She doesn't have to. She doesn't have a burden to prove anything. She's just a defender. But still, it's a death penalty case. So yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the first time you heard this admonishment was publicly. You haven't had any direct contact with her since before the plea?
Sam, this is a great question. The answer is no, of course not. I mean, if you were going to, let me back up and say this. If you were going to admonish an expert for some behavior, you'd probably want to talk to them first about what they did and why, and specifically what they did and why, as part of what's going on. But our relationship dramatically deteriorated once she made this surprise plea deal, which surprised most of the team. Well, there's a guilt phase and then there's a mitigation phase in the death penalty case. And the mitigation experts, we never met them. And even the guilt phase experts who were trying to reconstruct the crime or determine the events and the actions, we didn't talk to each other. We were very much compartmentalized. So I wouldn't even have anything to share from them other than the findings that are in the defense autopsy report. There's not an autopsy evaluation done by a defense expert. And I have access to that, but I obviously haven't shared that with anybody.
That's a perfect lead into, I think, the next question. I know that this is something I'm super interested in, and most people in this chat are as well. How did you get involved with this case, Dr. Turvey?
Well, I mean, it's not a secret that I was hired, so I can certainly discuss that. It's not a secret that I wrote a report, nor are my findings a secret because they were publicized in January with all the disclosures. In fact, there was an article written about my findings in Fox News back in January 2025, I think. 2025. And I was one of the only experts whose findings were disclosed to the public. How did I get involved? Well, I was, I would say, collegial, good friends and collegial with Becca Barlow, who was hired on early on as a DNA expert. I worked a case with her in California, and she asked to bring me on to evaluate the placement of the scabbard, right? Because they were concerned that there's evidence that it was planted because of the things that have all come to light. And then once I did that, once I was brought on board for that, they expanded my role and they expanded my analysis to a full crime scene analysis so that we could make determinations with certainty. And remember, I prepared a report in this case, which was submitted to Ann Taylor, I think, at least twice. One evening I was traveling, I was working really late, and I submitted it. We had a deadline we were coming up against in January of 2020, whatever it was, 2025. And I had to meet that deadline. And so she reviewed it, she accepted it, and she put it on file. So these findings that I've given and the extent and breadth of my examination are not some great mystery or some great reduction, as she tried to suggest in her admonition, which was bizarre. Trying to pretend, oh, well, he's just this guy. We just kind of hired him and just kind of did this. And you didn't vet me completely. You didn't ask for a report, didn't expand my role, didn't request a report that was X number of pages long and, submit that to the court as true and just and accurate. I mean, come on. It defies credibility. Her posture at this point defies credibility. So that's how I got involved. And that was the nature and range and scope of my examination, quite extensive.
I'm going to be honest. I think that had Ann Taylor not put out that press release statement about Dr. Turvey, I'm not so sure he would have done this interview. I think part of this interview is to combat her press release about him and to speak his side. I think had that not happened, he may not have done the interview. Just my opinion. Oh, stop it. Thank you, my dear. Good to see you. Hey, why aren't you playing, mister? What is going on? Why is it not playing? I stopped it too many times? What the heck? Oh, it's thinking. Why is it thinking? Can you play now? Uh-oh. Oh, no. Let's refresh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
That disclosure of that data dump
Sorry.
requires examination by the experts. So there's no.
Do you know what was in that data dump?
I didn't look at
I
it.
mean, well, no. I mean, did they say,
Nope.
Here are photos, here are videos, nothing. You just
No. No, she was not like that. So she wasn't. She
Probably.
the version of Ann Taylor that I know bears no resemblance to the Ann Taylor that took the plea and is talking in public right now. I don't know this person at all. I don't recognize her at all.
Well, when you last met with her, you had no indication that the plea was going to happen. And how did you actually find out about the plea? Through the media? I
found out from a colleague. A colleague texted me and said, "Hey Brent, I remember you were working on this case. I remember reading the articles. I remember you mentioning it. What's going on? There's a plea agreement. Is that true?" And I wrote back immediately, "No way, no way. There's a plea. There's no way. It's not happening." And then over the next 10 minutes, it was like bing, 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 bing. I was getting all kinds of text messages from different colleagues and different friends of mine. And
I don't know how that works. What is the technical, way for attorneys or public defenders to let everybody know? Shouldn't there be like some general type of email or statement or something, and you just mass send it out to all of your experts, all of the people that you were, that was going to come to the trial, things like that, everybody involved? Wouldn't there be something like that? I feel like that's, I don't know, like saying you're going to pick somebody up for a date and then not show up, like kind of icky. I would think that they would have been, I don't know, that they would let him know, or she would let him know, and all the other experts.
And people who work for me. We all found out with the rest of the world.
Is it normal? Oh, is it normal? Oh,
ahead,
sorry.
No, I was saying last time we talked, you were renting like a VRBO. You had bags, you had your clothes, like you were ready to go.
Yeah, of course. Well, let me back up.
I'll address this. Good to see you. First time here, I took a break from the case. I think some of us did, or most of us did at some point. I'm having difficulty understanding a lot. Is Brian appealing for incompetent counsel? He's not appealing yet. We all believe that something is coming. I think this is part of it. So there's been a new book that came out. Now, Dr. Turvey was a defense expert. So he was going to explain the issues with the chain of custody of the knife sheath, because there were issues with that. And that could have thrown all of that DNA evidence out and things like that. So basically the kind of big bombs that are happening in the case right now, no, Brian Kohlberger hasn't filed anything yet. However, I believe he could and probably should, but we're kind of waiting on that, hoping that it comes through at some point. Ann Taylor is being investigated for the leak. There was a leak to Dateline. right before a trial, and then there was the plea deal, right? So that was a pretty big deal. Now Dr. Turvey is doing an interview, so this is brand new. We've gotten a new book was just released by former FBI, retired FBI agent called Broken Plea, and he was provided every document in this case, all of the information in this case before he should have gotten it. He really shouldn't have it anyways because it's still sealed. So that was technically another leak. And he wrote a book on everything he had. So there's a lot of information that's wrong in there, but I'm sure there's some that's true as well that we don't know. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the case. Hey, what's up? Good to see you, Daco. Great live today, by the way. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the case right now, but this is where we're at. This interview of Dr. Turvey, again, who was a defense expert for Brian Koberger, did an interview just yesterday. So we're going to go over it.
Say something that hasn't been said before. One, the reason I was hired for this case is I was one of the only people on the whole case who's ever worked a mass homicide before. I've worked dozens. Well, a dozen or more. Somewhere between 12 and 20. If you look at my resume, you can go count them. That's the first thing. And I'm working a couple right now. Actually, I just picked up another one the other day. So that's one of the reasons I was brought in, because I have expertise and experience on these kinds of complex mass homicide events, right? The second thing is that when you are on a death penalty case, it is intensive. Everybody's heads are in the huddle, okay? Everybody is part of the process, because if they're not, you can miss something. And the consequences are life and death. So there's a lot of great articles on the death penalty issue and the work that's required and the focus that's required. And what they say is, quote, death is different, unquote. So when you have a death penalty case, you are responsible in a way that you're not in other cases, right? Because there's going to be appeals and there's going to be, you can do it, and then you can get a second chance. You can get a couple more bites at the apple if there's a problem, or if there's a procedural error or an innocence issue. In a death penalty case, it's dangerous. So that means there has to be a very high level of trust and communication between the people working on the case. And the fact that none of the defense experts were contacted or consulted as part of this deal, in fact, were misled by the defense attorneys as to whether or not there was going to be a plea deal is stunning. It's a stunning context to be in. I've only experienced this kind of thing one time before, sort of, but this is very stunning.
How were you misled?
What?
How were you misled? Exactly.
Well, as I said, the entire posture of the case was going to trial, and that changed on the weekend and was announced to the world without being discussed among anyone. And there's a lot of ways to describe that, but one is just it's misleading everybody else to let them think that there's one pathway that's happening, and that causes them to to engage in activity or make decisions and choices and planning and protocol and logistics surrounding that, and action plans that cause them to do massive amounts of work and commit to certain time frames, and then to sort of have the rug pulled out from underneath you for some reason without any explanation, then or now, as to why. Misleading is a gentle way of saying it. Misleading is a kind word.
So you don't have any information since the time the plea was entered as to what changed or why they went that direction.
Well, I directly asked that question, and I was told nothing. Nothing changed.
Was Hitler or the court, were they encouraging the negotiations regarding the plea deal, or there's so many different theories that we've all heard online. Some that Hitler was encouraging the two sides to mediate, see if they can come to a plea deal, or was it just completely like you had no clue that these negotiations? It sounds like to me you had no clue that these negotiations were going to go down that weekend.
None at all, and it's none at all, and that's sort of, in my perspective, and I don't. Ann Taylor doesn't have that much experience working death penalty cases. I do. I've done this many years, 30 years now, and in my experience, it is completely inappropriate to start making major decisions like that without first getting a sense of where the evidence really is at and having a team meeting and talking about it. And that didn't happen. I will just say this, without betraying any confidence, I can say that I asked multiple times. I asked at least twice and was given a third version of events. Every single time there was a discussion about this after the fact, I got a different answer as to what the precise sequence of events was. And in a normal case, like I said, I have clients that I've worked with for 10, 15 years. I got clients who I work with constantly on every case they work. I got clients who I trust them to do anything with me. I trust them to watch my kids. I trust them to watch my cats. I trust them with everything, because over time and temperance, you learn sort of the ethical character of the people you're working with, and that's why you work with them again, because you don't have you don't have any problems with the way they conduct themselves, and you know that when you're not in the room, the best evidence and the best ethical posture is going to be taken. In this case, I have zero faith and confidence in Ann Taylor in terms of her posture, because every single time I've spoken with her, she's given a different version of events about whether and why and how. And so at this moment, I can't violate any privilege with you because I don't know what the truth is, because I have not been told the truth yet that I can tell. I've been given 3 different versions of events relating specifically to your question. When did the deal start? When did they start? How did they get Brian to agree to it? And the involvement of Hitler. And I'm not a legal expert. I know what my role is, and I know what my onus is to. I know that my first onus is to being first we start with, you have to do your due diligence in every case, because that's what satisfies due process, and due process is a requirement of the Constitution. If you don't follow that logic, you have no business being an expert or being involved in the criminal justice system. Due diligence equals due process equals constitutionality. Okay, I don't know. That's the extent of my grasp of my situation or my role, and I don't know what the legal realities are around Ann Taylor taking this case. I don't know what the legal realities are of whether or not Hitler was involved and how he was involved, the judge or the prosecutor, and I suspect that it was done in such a way that was problematic, which is why I'm getting 3 different versions. All right, that's the problem. So I'm not disclosing anything because I got nothing to disclose. I just don't know what the truth is. I'm as stunned, shocked, and appalled as the rest of you, which is why I was happy to discuss the publicly disclosed elements of this case as they relate to chain of custody for the sheath, and as they relate to the untested DNA evidence from the hair found in Ethan's hand. All this was obscured in different ways, and so bringing that to light is actually not a violation; it's a responsibility.
Isn't it wild? It's like we are on the right page, you guys. This community as a whole, the way we dig into things, every single one of us, including you guys. I mean, you guys dig too. I know you guys dig on your own because I get emails and stuff, which I appreciate. I love them all. But can you guys seriously see how close we are to truly getting the truth and the facts? We knew that something was in Ethan's hand. We started with the squirrel. You know what I mean? Like, we knew that there was something there. We just hadn't nailed what it was. But it's so cool to know that we are on the right page. Like, we are not crazy, right? I hope everybody feels very validated by the things that he said, because we were there. We were right there. We knew exactly where to look and where to dig and where to find it. And just because we didn't get the right object in his hand doesn't mean that we failed. We're so close to knowing exactly what we're doing and getting to the facts and the truth. So you guys should all get a pat on your back for digging the way you dig and being so close. Because we were calling it before the whole hair thing came out. We were calling it.
If you don't think that's your responsibility, please, God, stay out of this profession.
We are going to get there. Absolutely. But I got something, because I'm an appellate attorney. I do primarily civil appeals, family law, and so forth. But I certainly understand the appellate process. And I know that with criminal appeals, one big avenue for challenging even a plea is ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, as I understand it, a lot of times defense attorneys are almost encouraging of their clients, hey, you need to pursue this. You need to look at ineffective assistance of counsel, get with an appellate attorney or post-judgment attorney. Yep. Is that your experience in general?
Let's just talk in general, not about this particular case. Okay. So that we can dial in, right? In general,
nope.
I am often called in appellate contexts for major cases, death penalty cases or LWOP, life without parole cases, to do a review to determine whether or not, let's say, for example, if the attorney had hired an expert such as myself at the time of the trial, using those standard practices, using those protocols and procedures that are available at the time, using the science available at the time, would they have discovered the evidence that was missed? That's one of the reasons why I have a library that's worth about 30 grand, because I collect old forensic and investigative textbooks, because sometimes I'm asked to go back to 1970. Sometimes I'm focused on 1980. Sometimes it's 2005. What were the practice standards at the time? So this is a very normal involvement for me. We call it IAC, ineffective assistance of counsel. And if you can demonstrate that the attorney was ineffective in terms of hiring experts or using experts or investigating evidence, it's a big deal. Like, for example, I do a lot of casework in Kansas, and they had I can't remember the stupid rule of the case, but it was a case involving a cell phone evaluation, and the defense attorney did not have the cell phone extracted and examined. It was sitting in police holding. And when the appellate attorney got involved, they found a bunch of stuff on it, apparently. And so they used that. They took that all the way to the Supreme Court of Kansas, who ruled that negligent failure to engage an expert to examine critical evidence is actually a reversible error, evidencing ineffective assistance of counsel. So your question is apropos, and it is absolutely relevant to this.
I think, and I want everybody to mark my words right here. I think what's going to be a big bombshell is that Kaylee's phone was never examined. I don't think Kaylee's phone was ever fully examined. I don't think it was extracted. I don't think they did much of anything with it. And I think that that's going to be eventually a huge bomb that comes out. Because could you imagine, seriously, could you imagine Kaylee, of all people, the injuries that she had? I mean, everybody thought she was the target in the very beginning, and then come to find out the injuries she had were different, her fate, all that stuff. So to think that she could have been the number one target and they didn't examine her phone, and I'll tell you why I think that here in a second.
To the present case that we're in, imagine again an expert who did not want to have that hair tested, right? How do you argue that?
I think we all shit our pants when we read that in Chris's book. Excuse my,
Wow.
That's literally what I think most of us did. We were all reading it together at the late hours of the night, texting each other, going, "There's hair in his fist."
It's not just that there's hair in his hand, okay? Because this is really important to understand the context. I'm glad we're bringing this up. The hair in the hand was described in investigative and forensic reports as debris. There's no debris. Debris indicates like multiple different types of small, sort of maybe commercial material, maybe hair.
Thank you. And that, I think, is what we all thought, because on Xana's door, there's listed as debris as well. So when I saw that in the reports that there's debris on Xana's door, I thought, oh, somebody with muddy boots kicked the door. No, I think that when they say debris, I fully believe now that they are referring to actual biological evidence that they never tested, and they're putting it as debris. How do these officers know, and the crime scene processors know from the get-go, what to label secretively so the public won't know, and maybe the attorney won't know to dig into that because it's just debris? How do they know what pieces of evidence to try and make it be overlooked? How do they know? How did they know exactly where to apply the amido black to make something come up? How do they know that? They know more. It's like they're part of this whole thing to throw it off track and make us look in a completely different direction, when we should be looking at everything that they're not collecting, everything that they're labeling as debris. I'm pretty sure it's all biological evidence now. It's wild to me. It's like they knew exactly what rooms to not apply amido black in, right? The downstairs bathroom, the guest bedroom on the first floor, the third floor bathroom. You know what I mean? They knew exactly where to not test anything, what to not process, because I believe now wherever they didn't process anything, that's where we should be looking.
Maybe dust, maybe pieces of paint or carpet, things like that, a bunch of different stuff, debris, okay? This was just a clump of hair in Ethan's right hand, and the hand slipped down into the space between the mattress and the wall, and the blood went down his arm, and it glued the hair to his hand, and it glued this more hair to the actual bed frame. And I didn't know it was there because it wasn't in the reports and it wasn't being discussed until I actually went to Moscow and examined the evidence. I examined
1 second. I want to listen to that one more time.
reports as debris. There's no debris. Debris indicates like multiple different types of small, sort of maybe commercial material, maybe hair, maybe dust, maybe pieces of paint or carpet, things like that, a bunch of different stuff, debris, okay? This was just a clump of hair in Ethan's right hand, and the hand slipped down into the space between the mattress and the wall, and the blood went down his arm, and it glued the hair to his hand, and it glued this more hair to the actual bed frame. And I didn't know.
I saw somewhere that somebody had put or said that there was actual glue. And I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. But now I get it. It's because the blood traveled down his arm, went into his hand, which then dried and made the hair stick to his hand because the wet blood is now dry. So it's sticking the hair literally to his hand and to the match or the bed frame. So not actual glue. It was just the wet to dry effect of the blood that made it kind of stick there.
Was there
Ugh.
because it wasn't in the reports and it wasn't being discussed until I actually went to Moscow and examined the evidence. I examined the bed frame myself and all the other evidence in the case.
Can you walk us through that when you went to the locker with, I think Payne escorted you, right?
Oh, they were all there. We had everybody was there. We had Payne and another guy, and we had the defense investigator taking pictures, and I took pictures, and this is not some secret I build for it. Somebody wants to go look at it. They can see it's in my report that I actually went there and documented everything before I came to my conclusions. And one of the things I found was this huge amount of blood with a bunch of hair, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's the hair. So it was not evident in the documentation that I had. Yeah, it wasn't evident in the documentation that I had, nor in the investigative reports, nor in the autopsy report. It was written in such a way to obscure that fact, which in my view is problematic. And of course, at the time, everybody else thought it was problematic too. So it was. This is not secret. This is something that everybody knows. It was submitted to the FBI for macroscopic, not microscopic, but macroscopic examination, which means looking at the physical features of the hair, the length, the color, the shape, the curls, the all that good stuff that you can describe. And they excluded it as coming from Brian Koberger. In other words, they could tell this did not belong to Brian Koberger. Wrong color, too long, all that good stuff. Okay. Now the next question is, let's test it and find out whose it is. Nobody wanted to test it, and that is also not secret because it was never tested. Because it was never tested, we can infer that nobody wanted it tested, not either side.
So Anne
Why
did
would-
not want that tested? Anne did not want that hair tested?
Well, it didn't get tested, and she knew about it. So that's the inference. There's no violation of privilege here.
It's like she was doing just enough to make it look like she was doing something, right? And I don't know. There's something with it. I feel like something's going to come out about her. I'm waiting on it.
This is something that we know existed, didn't get tested, and they knew about it. So
Did you suggest that it should be tested?
vehemently, multiple times. It was even one of the last things I said. As I was walking out the door. I will just tell you this in general. I would not want to be on the stand with such a piece of evidence untested. I would not to be on the stand having to explain why. If the prosecution had, well, Dr. Turvey, if this was such an important piece of evidence, why wasn't it tested? That would be
Did you-
a death blow. That's why.
Did you ever get an explanation why the defense did not have it tested?
No.
Wow.
I have the same response because there's a lot of people wonder, did she know about this? Did she get this? How much discovery did she have? But it's very clear that she knew this hair existed. She knew that it should have been tested.
Yes.
I could only imagine what you felt inside when you saw that at the evidence locker. I mean, if I was prosecution, yeah, I wouldn't want that tested either.
Well,
But
I
I don't
don't,
know how.
just so you know, I don't have those. I'm not a regular person. I don't have those kinds of feelings. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I know I can kind of, how do I say it? I have sort of the Cassandra syndrome problem where I know what's coming. I know what's going to happen next. And or who were legitimately there, but we don't know who all the visitors were. We don't know where people were sleeping necessarily up until the moment of the attack.
Like, doing it as long as we do.
Here's the thing. It's not about being jaded for me, because what I've learned is this. I have learned that my inept little fingers should not be in charge of anything. My inept little fingers can make things worse if I don't have all the information. So I'm not jaded. What I do get is disappointed. If I were jaded, I would stop doing this work. I think it's important. I think it's necessary. And I like to work with competent, ethical people. But what happens is I get disappointed by people who don't tell me the truth.
So I just want to
expect me to keep their secrets, which I'm not going to do.
I want to just kind of close the loop on that hair that was found in Ethan's hand. You said that it was excluded as Koberger's. Was it excluded as to any of the victims or any of the residents of the house as well?
It was never compared to anyone else in the house. In reality, we don't know. We don't have that list. We know who claimed to live there or who were legitimately there, but we don't know who all the visitors were. We don't know where people were sleeping necessarily up until the moment of the attack.
Were there
And
any
just-
other notable characteristics of the hair that was found?
Yeah.
What were they?
Watch his hands. Watch his hands, how he describes this hair, okay?
It was not that long. This was that long, and it was a blonde, reddish, sort of.
What do you say? This long? Oh, that for sure could be Dylan's hair. For sure. Look at the picture that Lakeland took of Dylan, sleeping with that blanket or whatever. I mean, she's got shorter layers here, and then she's got the longer, but you can definitely notice the shorter layers right here. So whether it was this or this, it definitely could have been her hair.
Andy Brown and I didn't look at the macroscopic detail, but the macroscopic detail that they were able to discern, other macroscopic detail, eliminated.
I want to know if it's straight. That's what I want to know. I know this. I know the hair upstairs was darker looking because it was covered in blood. So it's going to look wet, which is going to make it look darker. And I know that one or those hairs had the root attached to them. So those were absolutely pulled out. I don't know, and I don't think that the hairs in Ethan's hand actually had the roots on them, but you could still test them, that you don't absolutely need the root from my understanding. But for it to be about, what do you say, about this long, sandy brown, I just want to know if it's straight or not, because I think that would tell us more. Because I think some of the guys that had longer hair had a little bit of like a wave to it. Not super wavy, but enough of a wave to it. If it's straighter, then I would say that Dylan could be a culprit of that. I'm not saying she is, just that she could be.
From being Kohlberger's. Kohlberger's hair is short and black, right? This is medium length and blondish sandy brown. But more than that, all you need is 1 point of difference and you're done. So,
was there sufficient substance to that hair that DNA testing could have been done from it?
It's a fun question. I don't know because I didn't examine it. What you're asking, I think, Ron, is whether or not there were roots, right? Yeah. Roots can give you one kind of DNA, but it's hair. Hair has mitochondrial DNA. You can test it for mitochondrial DNA, if you just have the shaft. These do that all the time in other cases. So yeah, if you've even got a little fragment of hair, you can test it for DNA. Not a confirmatory amount to identify a person or a source, but you can exclude people.
Sounds like potentially a female's hair.
Well, I'll tell you this. I will divulge this. When other people saw it, not me. When other people saw it, they thought it was a female's hair.
Boom. Boom, diddy, boom, boom. They thought it was a female's hair. Boom. What other female that's there? I mean, sure, it could have been a friend of theirs or anything, but that still makes them part of it. The roommates. Boom.
And I thought, okay, well, that's a good theory. It's also possibly a male's hair because men wear their hair different ways. I don't think like that, but let's not guess. That's what I always say. Hey, let's not guess.
Let's test it.
Let's test it and find out. There are people who will say, and I don't mean to impugn lawyers, but there are many lawyers who are not as, we'll say, enlightened or motivated or competent as you. And they will say, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. That's the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. That's something from TV and movies. In reality, if you are trying to find out what's happening in your case, you need to test the evidence that's relevant. You don't ever want to go into court not knowing the answer to those questions. You don't want surprises in court. You want to go in, like the value of me, for example, is you call me in and I'll tell you both the strengths and the weaknesses of your case. You're going to know from where the blade will fall. All right. And that is much more important than me going in and going, rah, 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 you're so great. Your guy's innocent. Don't do that. That's nonsense. That's not going to help you.
Waste of money.
It's not going to help you at all. I go in there and I say, here's what they got. Here's what it means. And here's what you need to do to figure out whether or not it's accurate.
Do you know where that hair is still today? Is it still sitting in the evidence locker? Does Ann Taylor have access to get that hair tested should she want to at this point?
I don't know the answer to the logistical question is where it's at right now. Couldn't tell you. It would be it would be standard practice for the FBI to return the hair to the Moscow PD. They have the custody of that hair. The court can demand testing at any time if they wanted to, just like the court could demand an allocution in this case, which they didn't do, which is actually required to make sure you're not having a false confession. And I want to make that point really quickly before I lose it. And that is that fully more than 25% of the cases that are worked by the Innocence Project involve innocent people confessing to crimes they didn't commit at the urgence of their attorney. Just remember that statistic. It's pretty important.
I think it's important that you.
At the urgence of their attorney. That is so important. You know, a lot of times, first I want to say it seems like Dr. Turvey is actually advocating for Bryan Kohberger more than Ann Taylor did, which is really, really sad because technically he doesn't have as much pull as she does. She's the one who would have to say, yes, test this, do this, do that. He can say his, findings and, his work, but he can't really say, you have to do this, you have to send this off. So it's really sad to see that Dr. Turvey, well, at least somebody is still kind of advocating for him, but it's kind of sad to see that the defense expert in one particular area is more ethical and advocating more for Brian Koberger than Ann Taylor even did. That's really sad. Yeah.
Brought that up right now, in fact.
Yeah.
There's other hair that was also found upstairs as well. And one of those clumps of hair supposedly had bloody roots as well. Is that true?
I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
But I mean, there have been, like I said, there have been tons of disclosures on this case subsequent to the plea. And once the plea occurred, my involvement was over.
Okay. Yeah, it actually was. I think it was in Chris's book that there was hair found both next to Maddie and next to Kaylee, which one of which might have had bloody roots, and which also was not consistent with any of the people in the house or with Brian Koberger. So that's not something that you saw, though, right?
That's not something I examined. I was focused on sort of reconstructing the events of the evening, focusing on the sheet, which was clearly, sort of intentionally placed where it was, well after the crime occurred and blood had dried, and focusing on the staging elements, focusing on the timeline of events and the different methods of killing that were involved and the different weapons that were involved. So.
Now we're going to get to the knife sheath because I know everybody wants to talk about that. But really quick, with respect to the allocution, because I don't want to lose my train of thought.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, I think we were all pretty shocked that Brian didn't have to provide any details regarding the who, what, when, where, why of these crimes, other than him simply admitting guilt. He provided no.
I guess I don't understand how it could be Kaylee or Maddie's hair. First of all, I think that both Kaylee and Maddie's hair was much lighter than as described. I would say that their hair would be described as blonde, box blonde, not a light brownish at all. And plus, if it was Kaylee's hair, first of all, if it was Kaylee's hair, it would have been much longer. Also, if it was Kaylee's hair, we would have seen some of her grow out because she has really dark grow out roots. I honestly just don't think it was Maddie's hair because it would have been described as blonde. It can't be Xana's hair because hers is way longer and way darker. I'm not really sure if I necessarily think it was Bethany's either because I think Bethany's was super light blonde as well. So for me, the color wise, Dylan's is the only one who would technically be like a light brown. Not saying it's hers. Could be, allegedly. But her color wise, to me, fits the description.
No additional information. Is this consistent with other cases that you worked on?
No, not only not consistent, it's entirely improper. It would be setting the stage for a great miscarriage of justice without having some confirmatory information.
I think it's one and the same, Rosie. I think Dylan allegedly possibly could be the perp. And that's how it got there. It would more than likely be Ethan grabbing onto the hair as he's trying to defend himself. Or the only other thing I can think of is if a perp planted it there to throw off the investigation that it was completely somebody else's. I don't know.
To demonstrate because there's no actual direct evidence of his involvement at the crime or the crime scene. We don't have that. So what we need from any defendant in this case would be an explanation of what was done, how it was done, and that explanation should lead to corroborating evidence. And if it doesn't, then we have a problem. And the reason why it matters is because, again, that statistic I cited, which is that almost a third of cases involve clients or defendants that are pushed to take a plea that are actually innocent because they don't.
So I can actually speak to this myself. Maybe someday I'll disclose the whole reason why, but this is absolutely true. So I think most of you know, some of you know that once upon a time, many, many years ago, I was charged with a crime that I did not do. Legit, just didn't do it. And then the fight for that for me is one of the biggest hellholes I've ever been in my life. It makes you think of doing things that you would never think of doing because you go into a courtroom, whether you have an attorney or a public defender, they're not necessarily, when you're in it, in that moment, you're not necessarily feeling like they're on your side and defending you. It feels very clinical, like they're just following laws, right? they don't care whether they believe you or not. And in that moment, you want somebody to believe you and advocate for you and fight all of these people that are standing up in front of a judge saying you're this horrible person and that you did these horrible things, and nobody is helping you. Nobody is doing that. And you're fighting and you're fighting and you're fighting alone. And it is the scariest. And mine was such a small, stupid, silly thing too. It wasn't, seriously, not a big deal at all, but it didn't matter. It was changing my life, right? It was making me in this mental space that was so horrific and dark that I would have done anything to get out of it. And I think I've told you guys before, I remember when I was going into one of the court whatever it's called, where the hearing, one of the hearings that I had. And I remember being on like the third floor and looking out the window and just tears dropping down my face. I'm standing there alone by myself, and you're fighting alone. You're by yourself. And I just remember thinking, if I just jump over this ledge, it will all be over. Like, I don't have to deal with this anymore. It's horrific to be accused of something you didn't do and be called a liar when you know that you weren't. You know that you didn't do that. So I could imagine, yes, he felt very worn down. And at some point, you're tired of fighting. And that's why you take a plea, because you're like, it's the best of all the evils, right? It's the best of the worst that you can get, because either I'm going to prison for a year or life or death penalty or whatever it is, or I can just say I did it and then I get 3 months probation. Like, you don't want any of it. You want people to believe that you really aren't what they say you are, because you're not. So yes, it's very dark and it's a hell to go through. And I couldn't imagine being in his shoes. And I could imagine him saying, I'm done fighting. I'll just take the plea. I'm over this. It's so exhausting. And yes, makes you think thoughts that you never think thoughts you thought you'd think.
They feel like they don't have an advocate or don't have any support, and but at the time they make they accept the plea, they are alone in the world and mentally deteriorated to the point of giving up. So
That's something you guys have talked about quite a bit. I don't even think we were aware of how many people take a guilty plea for those reasons you just described.
It's a lot. It's a lot, and that's why people like me have a job in that part of the criminal justice realm and the appellate realm. Now, again, I worked a case one time in Colorado, for example. A guy completely confessed to killing somebody. All right, come to find out, that person was still alive. He got arrested. He got charged.
Thank you, Legal Swag. We appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much. So sweet.
The guy who confessed to killing was still alive. All right.
Did you hear that? Hold on. And I'm telling you, this is so more real than people even believe. I don't care how many times you say, I would never say I did something that I didn't do. Do you know how many times I said that in my life? And then here I am doing exactly what I said I wouldn't do, because it is, I can't even put into words the feeling that it makes you feel. And you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't function. It's horrific. It's a horrific thing to go through. So listen to what he said.
If a person is going to take a plea, then they must allocute. And that allocution requires that they give details of the crime that nobody else has, so that they can be certain that they are confessing to a crime that they actually committed. Not like in, let's say, in Latin America, for example, people will plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit for money and serve the time for wealthy people. That happens a lot.
Have you seen any cases that have been set aside after the fact or appealed or habeas corpus based on ineffective assistance of counsel for the lack of requirement of allocution?
No, because again, it would not be allowed to happen. No, nobody would allow that to happen. This happened. This case is replete with first times, with outlandish and bizarre occurrences that don't occur in other places. And I think we're forgetting that even though Idaho is part of the United States isn't a country of all these places that get.
Here, I'll address this. Thank you, Rosie. No, it's okay. You know, we all go through things in life, and that was just something I went through. And now that I'm so far removed from it, I'm in a sense glad that I did, because I have a perspective that many don't have. And I can advocate then for other people. Like, yes, people absolutely plead guilty to things that they didn't do, because that fight is horrific. And I truly wouldn't wish it on, I don't have enemies, but if I did, my worst one, seriously, I wouldn't. And I would stand up and advocate for my worst enemy had they gone through something like that. So yeah, in a sense, yeah, it's a learning experience. I'm glad that I did. Even though I didn't do anything wrong at that time, I'm sure I've done shitty things in my life. But I surely won't now. But no, I appreciate you. Thank you. Everything's a learning experience. I want to catch what he said, but I can't remember where it was.
There was either DNA or some other evidence that
I'll just say what it is because I'm not going to sit here and try and figure out what timestamp it was. He said that there was a person who pled guilty to a murder, and come to find out the person he pled guilty to murdering was still alive. They found him still alive, and this man pled guilty to a murder of somebody who's still alive. If that doesn't tell you how horrific that fight is.
led to someone being exonerated, exculpatory evidence, and they're out now.
Yeah, many. I worked on a case just a few months ago where my report. It's Kansas versus Julius Beasley. You can look it up. It was just 2 months ago, and I had prepared a report in that case a year ago, showing the crime scene was staged and the police had the wrong person. They arrested this homeless woman's boyfriend for stabbing her to death, and I was able to prove the crime scene was staged. The body was moved. She was killed somewhere else and dumped there, and all the elements were there for that. They didn't like that, but they also found out that other people had confessed to the crime, describing it exactly as I had in my report. And so my report, I wound up doing a second report showing that the police had gone back and tried to scrape over everybody who had given information that was exculpatory and hide video evidence and all this good stuff. They were, so the court, the DA the new DA got assigned the case, read both of my new reports and was like, we can't take this to trial. He's not the guy. And they let him out. So.
Oh, wow. They let him out. Thank you, Bianca. Welcome to our new turtle. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, babe. Appreciate you. Elantra? What Elantra?
I never think, but I don't think in those terms. I think in terms of what happened. All right. And a lot of the cases I worked that are appellate cases, we get people exonerated. You can go through my resume. You can see the cases I've worked where charges have been dismissed in death penalty cases or murder one cases. You can see the cases where people have been exonerated because of my testimony. And you can also, you may not know, but I've also worked quite a bit with the police and for attorney general's offices in different parts of the world, assisting with prosecutions and assisting with keeping the right people in jail and keeping the wrong people from going to jail. So the world is full of ethical attorneys and ethical investigators and ethical prosecutors, and sometimes they do the right thing when the evidence is presented to them in the right way.
Suppose an appellate attorney came to you on behalf of Brian. We don't know if he's talked with anybody or if that's in the works or anything. But let's suppose that an appellate lawyer came and talked to you and wanted to see, or maybe with another expert, do you have any evidence, any thing that you can offer that you think would provide good ground for this being set aside in some manner? Would you have a lot to give them?
Well, yes, my report. My report and the report of every other guilt phase expert working on the case. So every guilt phase expert submitted a report that lines up with mine.
I have heard of that. I'm going to have to look it up when we're done. I'll look it up later tonight. But I have heard of the yogurt shop. Now I'm going to have to look it up, though.
Every one of them. So what I'm telling you is this is a bizarre occurrence that comes way out of left field with no change in the status of the evidence that appears to point every arrow away from Brian Kohlberger. I would say this. I'll say it another way. Often in cases like this, I anticipate a future involvement being called at the ineffective assistance of counsel hearing for the attorneys involved. Mm-hmm. Because again, like we started out talking about this, can you imagine a situation where a forensic expert was involved directly in trying to conceal exculpatory evidence from the defendant? Can you imagine that? I'm not going to live that life. That's not going to work. I have to make sure that everyone understands it. And the other problem is there's nobody talking to Kohlberger except for his family and his attorney, which is still Ann Taylor. Which again is, I think, a little problematic, but that's not my call.
That's a lot of problematic. That's a lot. I really hope his family at some point sees that maybe they should be talking to someone.
Confused for a psychologist. A lot of times judges and attorneys, they confuse my role for that as a psychologist. I had a report today that the client wanted me to write about the psychological impact of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not a psychologist. Hire a psychologist for that. I don't talk to defendants unless I absolutely have to. I've done it maybe in 30 years. I've done it maybe 8 times, maybe. And that's only to go over facts and details at a crime scene to help me understand what happened when they were already stating there was like a self-defense case. And they're saying, this is what happened. Let me show you how. That makes sense. I don't go interview serial killers. I don't go interview mass murderers. Represent the physical evidence in the trial. I am here to be an objective voice for the physical evidence that exists and does not exist. That's what I do. That's the value that I bring. If I can't do that, then I have no real value, is my opinion.
And we'll get into all your scientific based conclusions at the end, but I know there's so many comments, so many people want to know. Can we just give them a little taste of what you believe the evidence has shown with respect to him being guilty?
Well, first of all, he is guilty legally. Guilt is a legal posture. He stated that he was guilty in court, and the court.
He's very careful about the words that he uses, and I very, very much appreciate that. Oh, thank you. Sharing the kindness like your other subs members. It's contagious. We appreciate your work and honesty. Thank you, Four Hands. We appreciate you for being here, always tuning in. Thank you so, so much.
Basically said, yep, you're guilty, and here's your sentence. Okay? So from a legal posture, he's legally guilty. Here's the problem, and this is the conflation of things. You can be legally guilty and factually innocent. Guilty and legally innocent happens all the time. Okay, so legal posture is you're guilty. Okay, that legal posture can change. It is not. How do I put this? The law can be negotiated, but science cannot. Okay, the law is negotiated.
Boom.
Well, I'll say it the same way I said this in back in the day, back in the long time ago, when I was young and had no beard and was much fatter. There's no physical evidence that suggests that Brian Koberger is responsible for this crime. That's all you got. That's all I can say. There's no physical evidence which suggests Brian Koberger is responsible for this crime. And anybody who says differently is twisting themselves into a pretzel with unconfirmed circumstantial theories they've created in their head. And by the way, that's why the prosecution was very clearly interested in making the deal.
Yeah. Doesn't explain why the defense made the deal.
Nope. Does not.
All right, let's get into the knife sheath. Let's get into that. Sam, you want to start us off with that section?
Yeah, I mean, well, I just want to hear from you, Dr. Turvey. What happened? How did you first go, there's an issue with the sheath? Because that's one of the biggest pieces of quote unquote evidence that everyone's talking about, that the prosecution has always pointed at Brian about.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's quite a few problems. And the first one is its placement. It is very clearly underneath one of the victim's thighs, sticking out, covered by a comforter, and very evident when you look at it in the photographs. It's hard to miss. But the problem is the knife sheath itself is clean, for lack of a better word. It's not being used. So that's the first thing. There's no usage. It's not like somebody wore it on their belt, and not like somebody scratched it or pulled things in and out, or pulled a knife in and out of it. It's pristine, other than a couple little areas of flecks of blood. So that's the first problem. One is placement, the location. You can't drop it and find it in that spot. And you can't, there's no evidence of usage of the sheath, and there's no evidence of any massive bloody transfer, which would be expected. If somebody slid that under there, that person would have the bloody hands, we assume, and we infer that it would have bloody hands, and it would be blood on it. There's no blood like that on it. No transfer from hands, and only a little bit of spatter. But it's on top of a sheet that is covered with a star field of blood spatter, okay? And that blood spatter is not, how do I put it? And this is, again, it's not secret. This has all been revealed. This has all been revealed over and over again. It's just a question of putting it together. The sheath itself has no transfer from that blood on the sheet to the top of the sheath as it slid into that position. And none of those transfers are smeared, which means it happened after the.
So interesting, right? And I didn't even think of that in that moment. For that knife sheath to get there would have to be some sort of movement. So that blood underneath there, first of all, there should have been blood underneath, right? Because there was blood already on the sheet. The knife sheath would fall on top of that. There should have been blood on the backside as well. There was not. And then as it fell and moved, because it's not just going to fall and sit in that one spot when all that activity is going on, all that commotion, all that attack, right? Two people, remember, it would have moved at some point. So that blood on the sheet, not the sheath, the bed sheet should have been smeared, and it's not. And I'm not talking about the smear at the bottom of the bed. I think that's from removing the bodies. I'm talking about the blood where the knife sheath was planted. And he specifically says planted. And that's huge, you guys. That's seriously huge.
Blood dried. That's the first set of problems we got. The second thing is it was originally observed to be on the floor by Taylor at the crime scene, all right? Much later on. And then finally, of course, after I'd written my report, we had done a very good job was done of going through some chain of custodies, and I was given this chain of custody and said, Turvey, what do you think? Because we think it's a problem, but maybe you have a different opinion because you're a forensic scientist and we're not. What do you think? And I'm like, this chain of custody has been falsified. People go to jail for that. They get put on leave, investigated, fired, and then criminally investigated and go to jail for that. So
not in Idaho.
Idaho, apparently it's no big deal.
Rules.
Well, anytime you have an attorney or a police officer telling you that chain of custody is no big deal, that to me is a red flag that suggests you should look at every one of their cases to see whether or not they've been falsifying chain of custody. Because a lot of agencies put up with it. A lot of agencies will just ignore when a chain of custody has been falsified.
Yeah, and of course, the law enforcement there said there was no problem with the chain of custody. But what I think I've seen as an explanation given was, yes, there's the handwritten chain of custody, which may have been done after the fact or put on there, but there's also these barcodes. Was there an electronically kept chain of custody?
That's BS. So ignorant, I can't even respond.
Oh my God, it's so bad. It really, whoever is saying that has no idea what a chain of custody is and what the barcodes are for. The barcodes are for locating the item on the shelf. It has nothing to do with the chain of custody. The chain of custody is about who's handled the evidence, who's opened it and closed it, who's received it, who's transported it, so that you can determine whether or not the evidence has been tampered with or altered inappropriately, and therefore who's responsible. If you go through and have one person just create one for everybody, that's not everybody. It's like the same as signing an affidavit. It's a sworn document saying, I'm receiving this. I opened it, I examined it, and there's going to be a report, and then I'm giving it back. And then somebody else comes and checks it out. It's a bit, so the idea of the barcode thing, that's somebody anybody who's talking about the barcodes as being a chain of custody, they are a functional illiterate when it comes to forensic science and custody of evidence. Functional illiterate.
That's even some attorneys. I was watching a podcast, I think last night, and I think they were PI attorneys, but one was actually a DA for a long time, and now he's a criminal defense, and he was completely trying to downplay the chain of custody and how it really wasn't that big deal. And even if it was, there was a broken chain of custody, it very likely would not have even impacted the outcome. But Sam and I were
not with him as an attorney, it wouldn't have.
For sure. And what if it would have?
So everybody should take note of who that guy was and never hire him for anything.
Terrible. I know, right, terrible.
There's a lot of ignorance on this issue, but any basic textbook on forensic science explains this very clearly. And what you want to do is have a forensic scientist explain it slowly, like they're talking to a fifth grader when they explain this to attorneys, prosecution or defense, or police officers, because this kind of stuff puts officers in jail when they fabricate what's called falsification of, we call tampering with evidence, falsification of public documents, false reporting, and forgery.
Can you think of any legitimate circumstance where the chain of custody, as it appeared in this, written by one person, the same handwriting, would be legitimate, or there would be a good explanation?
Oh, you can't vouch for somebody else. Let's do it this way. Let's say it this way. We're going to do a drug test of me, and we're going to take those drug tests and put it into a bag, and then fabricated them and asked people about them. She got fired for that. She got fired when that came out. All right, because it is an illegitimate, unethical, incompetent, and fraudulent scientific process. You're trying to bolster the credibility and reliability of a piece of evidence by fabricating all the names and signing it yourself. And when you do that, put your job at risk.
Would the prosecution have been able to rehabilitate that by bringing in all the people whose names allegedly appeared on that? That's the argument, right? That I think is their posture. That well, we're just bringing people and have them testify about that they actually did do it. That would work potentially, except one, I think the defense would have a huge problem with that because you really can't know whether or not these people are telling the truth well after the fact. But two, not every examination that was known to be done on that sheet was a part of the chain of custody. It was missing. It was missing some of the examinations. Wow.
Yeah. In Chris's book, he indicates that there was a period of time it was missing too, which is even more concerning.
Yeah.
So even if the sheath was not excluded by Judge Hippler, which who knows what he was going to do based on what he'd done previously, but there still would have been a huge reasonable doubt there for the jury on whether the sheath had been tampered with or could have been tampered with.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Ron, I think that's a good point because I know that everyone brings up the chain of custody and some people are saying it's not an issue, but when you're looking at the admissibility of potential evidence at trial, it certainly is an issue. What a judge would do with it may be a different thing, whether you'd agree with that or not, but it's still a very important issue because if it is excluded, then you can't even talk about that at all. It's out.
Or the little piece of DNA in the class. Here's the point. The people who are saying that are people who've already decided what they want to be true or what not to be true. But let's ask ourselves a basic question. It's like saying physical evidence isn't important or necessary. If that's true, then why do we have crime labs? Why do we bother to train people to collect evidence? Why do we bother to train people to test evidence, especially on other items? And again, that's not a secret.
I'm assuming you shared your conclusions based on your research. I'm assuming you shared those with Ms. Taylor.
For sure.
And you didn't even really have a chance to finish those tasks by the time he pled guilty, right?
Well, I can't answer that.
Okay.
I completed a lot. Let's put it this way: I completed a lot of tasks.
Okay. What were there other items of evidence that there were chain of custody issues that you did find?
I think that's a question that needs to be answered later. I can only just.
So there's more. There's more issues with chain of custody with other items in this case. We know what the jacket, the nightstand, there's other things. But I think there is something else that's really important that would throw this case completely in the garbage once we know what it is. So there's more chain of custody issues. It's not just the sheath, the jacket, the nightstand. There's more.
Discuss what's publicly disclosed.
Okay.
But I think that's a reasonable
part
question that we should be asking. Everyone should be asking that question.
See?
All right, I already got you penciled in for part 2, Dr. Turvey. That's awesome.
A year from now, after the IAC hearing, right?
There's
What?
got to be an IAC hearing, right?
There has to
No,
be.
no, there doesn't have to be at all. As long as Anteo is the attorney and representing Brian Koberger, there's not any chance of that.
Justice requires it. I think.
Well, I would agree. I will just say this: science and justice both require a level of transparency that we're not experiencing in this case.
Unreal.
Can I ask this?
You can ask whatever you want.
Was any DNA found on that night sheet ever directly tied to Brian Koberger?
Not that I'm aware of.
And then why are we seeing that all over the place that people are saying that Brian Koberger's DNA was found on the
Let me
sheet?
do this right now. You guys are smart people. I like you guys. You're smart. So, how many things do you see daily being discussed about this case that have no basis in reality?
Quite a lot.
So much bullshit.
That's the answer.
So I know in the book, well, actually, initially, the first crime lab that the sheath was sent to, they returned it saying there's no chain of custody, right?
No. That was you're confusing two different events. Right?
Yeah.
One is the Idaho State Police Crime Lab. They are the ones who originally said, "Hey, we got the sheath now. I need a chain of custody form for this because there's not one on it." So they asked for one, and a few days later, Moscow police sent them one that they had fabricated. Right? Then there's the other issue of the testing of the DNA on the sheath, which is on the clasp, which was done at the lab in Texas, I think. The initial testing. But these are two separate issues.
He still keeps saying the clasp. And I'm wondering if that really was what was tested and not the strap. Because even the middlemans at Othram, they say that it was the snap as well. So do we even really know what part of the sheath was tested? Do they even really know what part of the sheath was swabbed and tested? Probably not.
And
Lab
what
in
was,
Texas, Othram.
Sorry, what?
Was that Othram Labs? The lab in
Believe-
Texas?
I can't recall independently. The DNA was not my part, was not my area of expertise. The DNA interpretation is not my area of expertise. What I know is
And I'm sure that if Brian Koberger files something, I'm sure even our entire community would have no problem helping to donate and donating to his family to get a proper attorney and not a public defender this time. So yeah, I'm sure that if or when he files anything, we know that his family is watching. His family is absolutely watching. So I hope that they do know that if he does file something, they will have loads of help financially. And I don't think that will be a problem. I think probably every one of us, even if every one of us donated $5, do you know how much money that would be for them to get a proper attorney and probably even get them, the parents to the courtroom? I don't know if I'd want to speak out if I was their parent either. I mean, look at how much. We don't even know how many threats and bullcrap they've gone through. We don't know if they have to get security and all. We don't know what they're going through and why they're not speaking. But heck yeah, if Brian Koberger files something, I'm sure that somebody will organize something so all of us can donate and get it to the family.
that at the Frank's hearing, pretty much everyone agreed that that the DNA that they found was an investigative lead and not sufficient to make an identification.
So yeah, I know that in the book, in Whitcomb's book, Chris's book, he indicated that the FBI essentially gave Brian Koberger's name to local law enforcement as a tip. So that's as strong as they can get. Do you have any information about that, or did you get that from others?
That's something you'd have to ask the FBI about. I don't. I mean, I think that answers the question. Everybody who testified at the Frank's hearing did not perceive this as a nail in the coffin. They perceived it as an investigative lead that should be followed up on. But then, cameras start rolling and people get in front of the camera and a microphone gets stuck in their face and they don't want to look like a slapped ass. So they start saying stuff. I'm more than happy to look like a slapped ass, by the way.
Well, I can tell you, Dr. Turvey, this case, it needed you, it needed Chris, it needed
my reputation for future cases, right? I have other cases I'm working in. My reputation has to be protected for those, not just this one, right?
And one of the things that grabbed our attention to you is when we were going through the reports. This is even before we had ever even talked for the first time for our pre-call,
Well, she didn't really have any real concrete conclusions. It was all maybe this, possibly that. And then, of course, she was trying to explain away the absence of evidence, right? Constantly trying to explain away the absence of evidence. That's not the role of a forensic scientist. They're not there to be an advocate. They're not there to help support the theory of their client. They're there to explain whether the theory the client has comports with the posture of the physical evidence as it exists, okay? So she sort of took on the role of advocate, and that's my biggest problem. And she knows better. She knows better.
And I know that one of your conclusions, at least as it came out in Dr. Sutton's report and elsewhere, was that this crime was committed by at least 2 people, or certainly not committed by one person. Why do you come to that conclusion?
Well, this is not, again, this is all public. This is not me disclosing anything that wasn't already there. One, you have.
So I'll just say, I'll self-disclose a little something. Many, many moons ago, it was probably a year ago, maybe a little bit more. I wrote a handwritten letter to the Koberger family, and all I said was, Brian has support, and I listed a crap ton of YouTube channels for them to tune into, and put my name, and that was it. And that is what I mailed them, and they got it. So I know that they know where to watch, and I know that they know that there are people that support them. So I'll just disclose that. And literally, that's all I wrote in there. I wasn't like, la, 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 la. I was just like, Brian has support. Here's the channels. Have a good day. So
the amount of time that this would have taken, the amount of cleanup that was involved, and then also the involvement of the lower floors and evidence being moved around that has blood on it on the first floor and the second floor, as well as multiple weapons being used, at least 2 knives and at least 1 blunt force object, none of which were recovered or found, and then multiple methods of killing even on 1 victim, where you have blunt force trauma, strangulation, and then multiple knife wounds. So, and contemporaneous with the other victim being killed right next to her. And the ability to control people like that is very difficult. So those things led to the conclusion that at least 2 people were involved. You don't see that where just 1 person. There was one, I'll tell you, there's one case that was really interesting that I worked on. It was
sorry, I don't care about his other cases.
nothing. I mean, there's some shampoo and conditioner, I think, in the shower stall, but there's no garbage, there's no toilet paper, there's no floor mats. Everything's gone. Everything you expect to be is gone. And that's a bathroom that's being used by other people. But that's not the most important. That's important, but then you add that to the fact that there's a bracelet found on the floor.
You're beautiful, by the way. Yes, there is so much crazy symbolism in this case. Numbers, numerology, I mean, everything. You know, some people aren't into that, but it does catch my attention. It sure does. It's not missed on me there either. It's crazy.
Or in the bedroom to the right. You walk into that bedroom, you walk into that house on that with a stairway to the left and the bathroom in front, and there's a bedroom to the right. And in that bedroom, on the floor, police identified and photographed a bracelet that had blood on it. And they anticipated collecting it. And so they moved it to a location on the desk next to a computer keyboard and I think a power drink. Well,
of course, Van.
that item was left there, was photographed days later by another crime scene investigator still in that location, never collected.
I'm pretty sure I added pretty much like every single channel that's out there that is in our community. I mean, it was a 1.5 pages of channels. So yeah, I was basically proving to them like Brian has a lot of support. There are this many just creators that are in support of something's not right here. So yeah, I mean, every single channel. So it was a very long, lengthy list. And I did list every single channel that is out there, whether I even care for them or not. It's not about me. But so yeah, yes, Van, I put you on there. There's a lot of channels out there. And it was a long list. And I basically just wanted to show them that they have more support than they think. So
on the evidence list.
How is that even
So
possible?
never tested then too.
Never collected, never tested, never even sourced. Well, how is that possible? I mean, the problem we have is we have a movie and TV idea of how crime scenes are processed, all right? If you watch the body cams in this video, it's very instructive on this case. And these are, again, they've all been released. And what it shows is people that are traumatized, people that are upset, people that are excited, making judgments and making statements that are unsupported. I think first officer at the scene said, I think it's a murder-suicide. Looks like he killed her and she died, that kind of stuff. People say and do things. They decide what the narrative is, and then they start collecting evidence that supports and reinforces that narrative because that's what they're looking for. And once you do that, you're off the plot, right? You're gone. You're done. You don't really have any idea what's going on. It happens all the time. I work cases where I'm looking at.
I didn't put a return address on it. I just wanted them to know, just to kind thing, I guess. Was never looking for like a response or anything. I didn't put a return address. So I know we all know what their address is. It's in the documents and stuff. So
A group of people standing around talking to the police, and their feet are all covered with blood and blood spatter, and there's a murder weapon in the corner, and the officer never once collects their clothing or even notices the murder weapon because they're excited. Remember, these guys are not experienced homicide investigators. This is not what they do. Everybody there is brand new. They're new to the.
Don't believe that to be the case, but can you potentially elaborate if that is customary to not challenge the issues pre-trial and just quote unquote save it for trial?
Well, I'll respond in general without trying to get inside her head because she obviously did not want to go to trial. That's not a secret either. She made the deal. Without getting in her head, I'll just say in general, absolutely. There are times when it is an attorney makes a tactical decision not to disclose things, but hopes revealed on the. There are also times when you're barred from saying certain things and you kind of got to wait for the door to be open so that you can address issues. So I would say it another way. Since there was no trial in this case, we can't know what was in anybody's head about that strategy. What I know is these issues were all brought to the floor. They were all understood by all involved, and there was an agreement across everyone that there was no direct evidence implicating Koberger at the scene. That was understood.
So I don't think Dr. Turvey actually like dug into in the angles that we do, like looking at this person specifically and this person specifically. I don't think his expertise was to solve the crime. It's just to take evidence and show what's wrong with it, to have evidence that favors Brian Koberger. He's a defense expert. His job is more so to look at the evidence and dispel anything that could go against Brian, that could show that he's innocent. So I don't think he necessarily digs in the avenues that we do, like into specific people or angles or, things like that. It's more so dispelling the evidence.
Very clear. Not something that was hidden or misunderstood. And again, that's not a secret.
Finding holes in the prosecution, which were big and glaring and easy to do.
That's something that she was saying to the world at any chance she got. So, and by that I mean the filings that she made, which were public and that sort of thing. The world was watching.
Let's move into the beer pong table that is known around the world, which also the White Claws, the box of White Claws that Chris brought up in his book that I.
Okay, real quick, I do want to show you a couple of pictures regarding the pong table. Just real quick. These were sent to me by Conspiraling, and these are screenshots of the table from the body cams. And I just want to show that they actually there we go. They actually look quite a bit more wet. Like something is spilled on them, or maybe some sort of cleanup, or maybe something that happened in a fight. It could be the glare of the sign, but there definitely looks like some wet spots on there to me. So I don't know if this is a cleanup thing or happened during a fight, but there does seem to be some sort of liquid on here. And I just hadn't really seen it from that perspective before. I always thought that everything had been dried up by then. It does look like there could be some wet spots on here. Have one more angle of it real quick. And these are from body cams, so they're not like perfect and they're not super lit up or anything, but you can definitely see wet spots, specifically like right here. If you can see my cursor, that's definitely a wet spot. That is a spill right there, or something. Could have happened during a fight or whatever, but it was large enough to not dry up in 10, 12, 15 hours whenever this was taken. This is from the body cam. So it's just something I hadn't really seen before, and it caught my attention. So they're speaking of the pong table right now. So thought I'd add that in there. Yeah. I have no clue what liquid that would be. I don't know what it came from. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know if it came from a fight or a cleanup or, stuff like that should be addressed and looked into by the police.
I think shocked all of us as well. Are those a couple issues that you could?
Well, the beer pong table is boring to me. I'm not interested in that. There's so many other bigger issues to talk about. The beer pong table has no relevance in my mind whatsoever. But I can say that the white claw box had blood on it, and you can see it photographed in different places around the scene. So it's being moved. And there are a number of items of evidence that got moved around, whether by police or other people interacting with the scene, like the knife that got used by the first gentleman in the friend who entered the house to clear it with his knife while everybody else.
So he says the knife that got used. And I don't know if he is trying to insinuate something or if he just means it was picked up and in his hand so that he used it to possibly need to defend himself or whatever lie story that was. But he says specifically the word used. So I found that interesting.
Was hiding in the bedroom. That knife, just sort of moved around. That's interesting to me, but I want to say it this way, and I don't want to be condescending or mean, but I think people have focused on these things because that's what they had. And for me, it's interesting. I'm glad that Chris is talking about it in his book. I think it's interesting. A lot of people have been talking about it. But to me, it's like 25th.
That person said, need more people with the same mindset as Dr. Turkey. And that's funny because if you've ever texted somebody about this and tried to text the word Turvey, it comes as turkey. It's kind of funny.
26th, 27th thing on the list. Just way down there.
What are 1, 2, and 3 on your list?
Great question.
The sheath, the hair, and the cleanup, and the lack of evidence tying Coburg to any of it. Lack of physical evidence.
Is there any?
But also, what's really important is the 911 call. The 911 call is full of false statements by the people on it about what's going on and what happened and what they're observing. So all those things together are way more important than whether or not there was something on the beer pong table, or whether there was a crash. Or that's interesting.
Sometime later this week, we're going to have a Dylan episode 4. It'll probably be our last Dylan series episode, but we're going to have a 4. And then I do want to go back over the 911 call because there's something with the timing of it. I know we've all discussed timing and there's issues with the timing, but I think there's a little bit more to it and I want to go over it. So just keep that in mind for later this week.
And it's part of the narrative. I get it. But it has no interest to me whatsoever.
So what is specifically interesting to you about the 911 call?
Wait. I was like, Sam, I want to get into that, but I just have one more question that we could finish here before we get into the 911 call. Do you believe the narrative is on par with what is being represented by the prosecution? And I think something that people don't entirely get in Chris's book is that I don't know that Chris entirely believes that the narrative as is what it was claimed. They're going off of what was presented by the prosecution and what was known to be true, or at least that was the presumption. Do you believe that time frame is actually the time frame of the murders? Because we hear screams as early as I think it's like 1:40.
I mean, okay. I mean, it's just.
He says it's not interesting to him. I think that's not his area of expertise. He's probably not going through the audio, right? He's not going through the Linda Lane audio. They probably maybe looked for cars. I don't even know if he was part of the whole car thing or not. She might have had a different expert for that. I think he says that's not interesting because he is just not knowledgeable about it. It just wasn't his area of expertise. Not that it's not important, because to us, it's important. All of it is, really.
It's not that interesting, in my opinion. I mean, it's interesting to people who are trying to get through the granular detail. I get it. But for me, it's not that interesting. There's much bigger, much more important issues. So let me say something that's going to be offensive, and I don't mean to offend anyone. Unless if you are offended, try not to take it.
We have thick skin.
Thank God. I don't believe anything. Belief is a word that means accepting without proof. I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything. I don't have any of that issue. All right. So, so when you ask me, do I believe this? Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I require proof. I base my findings, my expert forensic findings, on facts and evidence. Right. I don't do belief. And I don't do guesswork. This is what the evidence supports and what the evidence doesn't support. And that's why I say that the beer pong table is, it's like a little stroke fantasy of a bunch of fangirls and fanboys out there who really just want to get into that granular detail that doesn't move the needle. All right. And I know that sounds offensive, but that's the way it is.
It's not offensive at all.
Thank God.
It's very straight up. All right. So with respect to the 911 call, and I just want to say it was actually the 911 call. I think it was Outcast's original 911 call, or that he did. That was what got us into the case.
For example, the commentary that somehow the diluted blood could be mixed with saliva. There's nothing.
I think there's more diluted blood than we know. Now that we know and can see what it looks like and how light it looks, and it's just like looks like a water drip on a wall almost, maybe a tint of like a pink to it. I think there's more than we know.
Nothing that you saw that would support anything wild like that. Obviously, I feel kind of embarrassed asking that question.
We laughed with Chris about that. The amount of saliva that would have had to been produced.
I don't even want to comment on it because it's such a bizarre. Everyone's focusing on this because that's what they've had for years, and they're focusing on this little bit, and they're ignoring the planted sheet. They're ignoring the untouched hair. They're ignoring the timeline. They're ignoring the cleanup. I mean, come on, get back to reality.
It does seem interesting to me that whoever did it was able to take away all evidence of clothing, weapons, anything used in it, but forgot the sheet.
Well, the sheet wasn't forgotten. It was deliberately placed. So because there's no way to get it. And it was deliberately placed after initially being found on the floor. That's not me saying that. That's the police report saying that and the photograph saying that. I'm not disclosing anything secret here. This is exactly what the narrative has shown and what the evidence has shown. It's just nobody wants it. The problem I'm seeing with this case over and over again is the people who want Koberger to be guilty, they're willing to overlook huge holes in the narrative. They're willing to overlook massive amounts of evidence that point in other directions. And the people that want him to be innocent are focusing on the granular detail that's not relevant because they don't have access to the actual evidence, or they maybe have access to it, but don't have the ability to assess it, examine it, and interpret it in the way that a forensic scientist does.
Do you view the cleanup as exculpatory evidence in favor of Koberger? In other words, that the fact that the cleanup happened really leads to the inescapable conclusion that he couldn't have done this in the time he allegedly.
Yes, he refers to it as planted. Absolutely, 1,000%. He believes it is planted. Like that mug was put there, not during crime time either. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's just clean that up a little bit and just say it this way, very simply. What happened at this crime scene took way more time than the prosecution has allotted for Brian Koberger to be responsible. What do they got? Somewhere, depending on the narrative they give, it's somewhere between 7 and 15 minutes. This would have taken much longer to do that. More importantly, the proof that they had of this was they had an officer run up and down the stairs to try to, show that he could do all this really quickly without a cleanup.
Which is so wild to me because there's so much more that goes into that. When somebody gets out of their car, let's go with the prosecution's theory, right? It's Brian Koberger. He pulls up, we've talked about this before. He gets out of the car. Do you think he's just walking up to the house and just walking in? No, you're looking in windows and you're checking and you're listening. Like, what if there's a guy in there with a gun? What if there's 20 dudes in there? You don't know. So of course you've got to listen and check. It takes way more time. There's more that goes into it. They didn't account for all of the fighting and the pushback and the different levels, and they just did it. Plus the cleanup. No way is this happening in 15 minutes. And they even think it was less than that. 6 or whatever it was, 5, 3, I don't know. Changes all the time, but it's just not possible.
But even so, the problem with that is he knew the house. He knew the routes. He knew the rooms. This is not a home that existed based on the floor plan that was filed with the city or the county or wherever. You couldn't go to the city and the county and get a floor plan that matched what happened here because the owner had transformed the interior into a living quarters for these students, right? Putting at least 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on each floor. Okay. But the way it was laid out was so weird that if this was your first time in there, you're going to be lost. And if it's dark, you're going to be even more lost. You're going to be searching. But instead, this offender went right upstairs to the 3rd floor, attacked the girls and killed the girls up there, then encountered Zainab in the kitchen on the way out. And
there is no way that happened. I don't believe that. And I don't know why he believes that either. That sounds so silly to me that Xana was in the kitchen. He says because there's evidence that she was eating her food in the kitchen. And okay, so if she was encountered in the kitchen and she's eating her food in the kitchen, why the hell would she, first of all, run to her bedroom rather than out this slider door that's wide ass open? Not to mention, you think she's going to get encountered by a person with a mask and a knife and run with her plate into her bedroom? No. I just don't believe that she was encountered in the kitchen. I believe she was in her room. Ethan was in there. The door was shut. Somebody knocked on their door. I believe Xana said, "Who is it?" Knew who was behind the door. And that's why she got up casually with her plate in her hand and opened it. She was not encountered in the kitchen. There's no proof of that. Don't you think if she was running with her plate in her hand, like a French fry might fall off in the kitchen or in the hallway? Like there just wasn't that. There's no proof to me, for me, allegedly, that she was encountered in the kitchen. That sounds so silly.
She ran down the hallway and they chased her down and killed her and killed Ethan as well. So,
what evidence? I think in Chris's book, he mentioned that it appears as evidence that Xana was first encountered, at least by the killer or killers in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Is there evidence of that? Because a lot of people have tied, there was initially some an indication that Xana's blood was on the beer pong table, which turns out that was a mistake by Sutton. What other evidence was there of Xana initially being encountered in the kitchen area?
Ethan was drunk and asleep in the bedroom. Right? They'd all been out drinking that night. Okay, they were all intoxicated. So he's asleep in the bedroom. She orders her food. She receives her food, and she's eating it in the kitchen. Part of it can be found in the kitchen where she's eating, and she's on TikTok, going through TikTok and doing stuff. Then you find some of that food in her bedroom. All right, those two things show she was started out in the kitchen eating, and then wound up in the bedroom because that's where she.
And maybe that happened, but that doesn't mean she was encountered by somebody in the kitchen. It just means that she brought her food to the kitchen and then took it to her room and then was attacked, in my opinion. Oh, come on. Don't do this again. Ugh.
And see them in the lobby of the Moscow PD. They're all covered together. I mean, even when we do our trials, if we have witnesses that are going to testify to anything, they have to be outside of the courtroom from the second that the judge takes the bench. It is just, it's hard to process how.
Let's back up. Let's back up and remind ourselves that
That's actually a really good point. Xana also thought it was a girl at her door because she opened the door with no pants on. That is an excellent observation. Because if that was me and there was a guy or I didn't know who was on the other side of the door and I'm in my underwear, I'm putting pants or shorts or something on. I'm covering up. That's a really good point. Really, really good point.
people in the house were together talking for 8 hours. Up, right? That's first thing. And we don't know all the people that were in the house, just the two that admit they were in the house. Then, when the police arrived, everybody got out of the house, and everybody stayed together, and they clumped together, and they spent hours together talking outside the house while police responded internally. So, from the get-go, there's a lack of proper procedure being followed with respect to separating witnesses and getting good statements from them. Everybody's just too busy reacting because, again, these people are all very inexperienced with this kind of crime. So, the context is one of extreme contamination of witness statements. And then, subsequent to that, every interview after that, things just kind of change and details get added, and inconsistencies become clear. And again, that would have been presented at trial, I imagine.
Was there any other point of significance? You mentioned the knife that was picked up. I don't know if Hunter picked up the knife when the police first got there. Is there anything else of significance? Could that have been a potential weapon that was used on the victims, or just significant in how it was handled?
It was just how it was handled. I mean, they were too busy responding emotionally to the crime scene as opposed to professionally. So.
And surely it wasn't somebody that Xana was expecting to let all the way in her room, because Ethan is laying there naked too. So yeah, somebody she was comfortable with, but knew wouldn't come all the way in her room too. Somebody who probably just had like a question, like hey, have you seen Murphy type of question.
I mean, it was there. We see it. It moves. It sort of disappears and moves around. But the fact that you have somebody in there walking around the crime scene with a knife, who's not involved in the crime, obviously, that's a problem.
Right.
And that contaminates the scene. And law enforcement's job in those circumstances is to make sure that contamination is mitigated as much as possible. And that really didn't happen.
I got a question about Dylan, who supposedly came face to face with.
Yeah, probably. I just don't think that she was encountered in the kitchen, because that just doesn't make sense.
At least one of the killers. She apparently was treated quite differently than Xana, who apparently came upon the killers at some point. She was chased and killed herself, but Dylan was not. Based on your experience, I know you've got some experience with criminal profiling as well. What does that suggest to you? I
don't accept that version of events is accurate, so I don't make anything of it, because I don't accept that she's a reliable witness because of so many things that have been said that are just not borne out by the evidence.
Do you believe Bethany is a reliable witness?
None of them are. None of them are reliable. They've all said things that are not true and patently false, especially on the 911 call, and especially in the other interviews they've given. So
it's not just a matter of not maybe they were drunk, or maybe they were not comprehending things.
I personally believe the phones, I believe that the white phone is Xana's and the black phone is Ethan's. We've seen several videos of them, pictures of them, and she always has a white phone and he always has a black one. So that's just what I think. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
It's a little more than that. The reliability is not just in not giving coherent information, it's giving false information, right?
Well, information that is demonstrably false. I can't, and I'm not saying they're lying or intentionally deceiving. I'm just saying, here's how you got to perceive me. Because
what direct evidence at the scene supports that? Because we don't have any of those murder weapons.
The autopsy reports.
Why? Okay, we've got pictures of Dylan with different knives. We've got pictures of other people with plenty of different, very large knives. How come none of those were taken? None of those were asked for. And at this point, I feel like it's a moot point, because we, at this point, should kind of start getting the idea that law enforcement was purposefully covering this up. Don't know why. At this point, I think there's more to it, but I think at this point, it's just because they couldn't have a U of I person do this because they need that enrollment money. They couldn't have it be an Idaho on Idaho. They said that from the beginning. It had to just be somebody from a different state that didn't have anything to do with them, basically. But we know law enforcement's covering up, so.
The state's own autopsy reports come to these conclusions. This isn't me. I didn't do the examination. The autopsy reports make it very clear. Multiple methods of killing, multiple weapons. The state's own autopsy reports. The state's own medical examiner would have been a key witness for the defense.
Their own medical examiner, which tells us why we're not getting the autopsy reports, right? We should.
And multiple stabbing weapons.
That's right. One that's one-sided and one that's dagger, which has got two sides.
Did anybody test or try to determine whether a K-bar knife was one of the weapons?
Not that I'm aware of.
We see a lot.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Not that I'm aware of. They didn't even test to see if a K-bar could have been used. They just planted the sheath and went with it.
About sheath, you can do testing. You can determine that, can't you?
No, you can't. That's TV movie bullshit. You can't. Okay. You can determine depth of the injury. You can determine width of the injury, but you can't. You can eliminate knives, but you can't usually confirm what knife was used or not. But I can tell you this much. Let me say it a different way that you're not going to like. There's no evidence that a K-bar knife was used in the commission of these crimes, other than the sheath, which was directly deposited. But that does not mean a K-bar knife was used to inflict those wounds. Perfect. And by the way, pretty sure I'm the only person in this case who's actually worked a case involving a K-bar murder. A murder with a K-bar knife. Was an ex-Marine in what was it, Vista, harmful to Brian Koberger. All right. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, when the investigation took place, I was like, of course I wasn't the leak, and I signed the affidavit and was happy to do that. Would have been happy to testify about it, but because that's the onus.
I don't think he's the leak at all. I don't.
The responsibility is not to be a leak, not to provide confidential information, especially when a judge gives an order. You got to follow it. But there's no way that this did not impact a potential trial or his ability to get a fair trial, and that would be the intent. But that does not mean that the source of the leak was the prosecution.
So we're going to leave it.
I wonder if he knows who the leak is.
There.
It's public knowledge. It's public knowledge. We've all read it online. We've pretty much seen it everywhere. It's public knowledge that Ann Taylor is being investigated as a potential leaker.
Well, her office in general, but then her in specific, I imagine. But let's put it another way. There are two investigations. I think people are conflating these. It's really weird to me, just how uninformed people are and how confident they are stating things that are just not true, that they don't understand, and blasting them to the world. Let's make this clear and make it easy for your listeners to understand. First, after the Dateline leak, there was an administrative investigation by the court at the direction of the judge, all right, to find out who that leak was. An administrative investigation, okay? That's investigation number one. That investigation was completed, a report was filed, and that file was sealed, okay? You can see it in the documents. It's a sealed file. It's public. It's public that it's there and sealed. Then, and I thought that was it. I thought it was all done. Then in January, I got contacted by the Ada County Sheriff's Department, a guy who said, I'm a detective and I have, I'm in charge of, me and two other officers are in charge of conducting a criminal investigation into the NBC data leak. So this is a second separate criminal investigation. The first one was administrative. It had a result and it's sealed. Now they're doing a separate criminal investigation. And I don't know when they started that, but they contacted me in January. Then, most interestingly, and I didn't respond, by the way, I didn't respond to that. And I have no intention of responding to it. I wouldn't talk to the police without a subpoena and a defense attorney with me, just because I don't trust the process in Idaho at this moment.
I was just gonna say, especially not in Idaho.
Yikes. Do you hear that? Even he wouldn't talk to an officer or a detective or anybody without an attorney. Wow, that's big.
No, well, in this context, I don't trust them because I don't know what their goal or their intentions are. All right. So Ann Taylor contacts me about
That's scary. That's really scary. But we all should be like that.
6 weeks later, giving me permission to talk to the police. This is a red flag for me, like a burning, bright, screaming red flag, because the first thing I did was contact my clients and say, hey, I've been asked by my attorney client in this case, my former attorney client in this case, to speak freely with the police about the leak. They're going to ask me questions about everything. All that'll do is just violate the privilege top to bottom. And she goes, every single attorney, I talked to 3 of them. They're all top-notch attorneys. They said, do not talk to the police. You're going to be hanging out there to dry while Ann Taylor has invited you to violate.
Do you guys hear that? So there was already an administrative investigation into the leak that was sealed and finished, right? They put it up, it's sealed. Then there was a criminal investigation into the leak. So somebody could do jail time for leaking this information. And he contacted Ann Taylor when the law contacted him to talk to him about it. And Ann Taylor said, go ahead, go talk all about it. Well, that would violate his attorney, that whole thing, their agreement, the NDA and everything. So then that would get him in trouble if he chose to do what she said, which was go ahead, go talk about it. He can't talk about it. And she says, go ahead, like she was trying to set him up. Sick.
The privilege that she has with Brian Koberger, which I would not do. So I didn't respond to her either, but she gave me permission to do it. What should have happened from any ethical defense attorney is that she should have put herself between the police and any of her experts being spoken to and said, you may talk to me and ask me questions, but you will not talk to my experts. That's what she should have done. Instead, she said, go ahead and talk to him, say whatever you want. Are you out of your mind? You think I'm going to do that? No way. Then they contacted me again about 4 weeks ago, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, saying, hey, we're still interested in doing an interview, just really casual, I'm their buddy, and I'm not doing that. So that investigation is still ongoing. That criminal.
Well, and right there should tell you that investigation is not about him. They want him to tell them what's going on with somebody else, because if it was actually about him being the leaker, they would be pushing and calling and pushing and knocking and calling and pushing and knocking him. They would get him in there to talk to him. They're not doing that. They want him to tell on somebody else.
No, investigation is ongoing. But understand this. They concluded their administrative investigation and filed a report. That signifies to me, and should signify to anybody with a brain, that they know who the leak is. And they're not going after their own people. They're going after somebody in Ann Taylor's office.
That would be my guess, because they got the administration, they got the person they believe, and now they're doing a subsequent follow-up independent investigation to make sure that they're going to get the same finding, is what I would presume.
No, that's not it at all. It's exactly the opposite. Nope, you got to understand. Does everybody here know what the Garrity rule is? No. So,
we're about to know.
You know what the Garrity rule is, or you don't. It's not a little bit.
We're about to know. You're going to let us know.
You heard of it. Okay. All right. Well, the Garrity rule says that you can't use the result of an administrative investigation in a criminal investigation. So if you want to conduct a criminal investigation into an administrative finding, you have to conduct a law enforcement agency has to conduct their own separate investigation, conduct their own interviews, collect their own evidence, and do their own stuff. That's the Garrity rule. All right. So this comports with the Garrity rule, which is one is administrative, and they come to a finding, and then one is criminal, and it's church and state. They can't meet oil and water. Otherwise, there is a component. Garrity argues there's a component of coercion on the part of the state to investigate its own people and blah, blah, blah. I've written about it quite a bit. It's actually pretty interesting, but most people don't really understand that. In fact, not only that, but most people in law enforcement don't understand. I've worked cases where I've not worked. I am aware of cases where, like, let's say in my hometown of Sitka, there was a jail officer named podcast, is that there are going to be people who will repeat from this podcast things incorrectly, inaccurately, and craft it into their own narrative. I'm not unfriendly. I just don't like playing dumb.
So, Dr. Turvey, what do you think with respect to, I'm not sure if it was something that you would speak about, but all of the phone data information that has been released as of late, is it something that's super important? Is it kind of like the beer pong table? I think most of us are sitting there when Ethan got.
Hold on, he's going to give us a little slip, I think.
The text from Erica that he was being cheated on. The lack of no response, at least from what we can tell, even inquiring about it, that is concerning.
Well, let's put it this way. First, all the things I said before that are my top 3, 4, 5 things, those are still the most important 3, 4, 5 things. However, I haven't examined that data dump, and I'm not going to. That's not my role. I'm more interested to see what you guys think. I'm more interested to see what the public thinks about it, because the reality is it has not been examined by anyone. I'm more concerned about the lateness of the data dump. I'm more concerned about how we got gigabytes of data to examine on the eve of trial, a month before trial. That concerns me, because there were years for that disclosure to occur. And either that would have required, in my opinion, not my opinion, my experience, normally that would require a case to be pushed back. And nobody seemed to want that.
He is very specific about the words he used, and I want you to catch something. He is very specific with what language and words he uses.
Wanted to get there and get into court and do it, or make a deal. So, and I'm not disclosing anything secret there. It's just my experience is the result of that sort of lateness is a sort of a punishment by the court, or acknowledgement that more time is needed to examine. You can't have people on stand testifying about evidence that just got disclosed and hasn't been examined. That's the more important.
It is very concerning. It's so late.
Yep.
Is it even possible that Brian could have had a reasonable knowledge of what was in that data dump by the time he pled?
No, he wouldn't know. That assumes that he was in a state of mind that he could participate with his defense and be going over. I don't know how he was getting information. I don't know how he was receiving it. I don't know how he was reviewing it. I had no contact with him. I don't know. But I can tell you this: in order for any defendant to participate in their defense, they need access to all the evidence and information, and they need time to review it, just like the rest of us.
And there just wasn't time for that.
It had just been dumped on us, and then we made the plea. Or I didn't.
What?
I didn't make the plea.
To your knowledge, was Kaylee's phone ever actually gotten into? Were they actually able to recover the data from Kaylee's phone?
Oh, I don't want to comment on that.
Hold on. I don't want to comment on that. Now listen to this next words that come out of his mouth.
Part 2 coming soon.
I want to comment. I like commenting on things that are public and that I have examined.
Things that are public and that have been examined. I don't think Kaylee's phone was examined. And I think that was maybe I don't think it was like a slip. I think it was just a general comment, but I think it was pertaining to her phone. I don't think her phone was examined.
So
That's a hot topic on.
Are there any other things that are public and that you've examined that we haven't brought up that are significant?
not that are significant. There's a lot of rabbit holes in this case. A lot of rabbit holes. Okay?
What do you think?
What about the spare bedroom? Can we talk about the spare bedroom?
In what way?
That's where I think, isn't that where Dylan's green jacket was found?
Yeah.
And that there was actual evidence that blood was on that jacket?
Yeah. Should have been examined more carefully. Should have been, just like every other piece of.
So for the people that are saying it was tested for blood and came back as negative, what actually happened was it was presumptively positive for blood. Usually, if it's presumptive positive, normally it is, right? It's not usually a false positive for blood. What happened was the officer that went and picked it up from Dylan then doused it with Amido Black or Blue Star, not Amido Black, Blue Star. And it ruined everything about this jacket. You then could not test it. That's why then they were like, yeah, no blood. Because they couldn't.
Evidence in this case. My point goes back to the general question for me is why was everyone so unenthusiastic about testing evidence in this case? I'm very unenthusiastic in my opinion. It seems like a decision was made early on, and then disclosures to the defense came as a result of those sort of the narrative decisions that were made. But then they were compelled by the defense to disclose stuff, and so they were slow rolling the information out. This is a very common tactic to slow roll disclosures and prevent what we call timely disclosures, and then prevent examination prior to trial. So you wind up on the stand with evidence that's been given, maybe the couple weeks before that you haven't had time to look at. It's what we get the concept we call forced negligence, right? Forced negligence.
What do you think is the most persuasive exculpatory evidence?
The hair in Ethan's hand. So goddamn obvious.
So crazy.
Goddamn obvious. It's so obvious. The hair in his hands. I want to know whose it is. I want to know how.
Think of this being you. Think of this being you, yourself, sitting in prison for 4 consecutive life sentences. And there was hair found in the victim's hand that is clearly not yours. How, like, seriously? It's just unbelievable to me, the amount of corruption and lies that destroy not only not only do we have 4 victims and their families, we have Brian Koberger and his families and everybody that it continuously affects. And it's not just him, it's thousands of people. Thousands of people. It's unbelievable.
I got there.
Just lives purposely ruined. But if it was any of those officers' kids or them or their family, they would be heated. They wouldn't even be in that position. And it drives me nuts.
Once we know whose it is, we'll know exactly how it happened.
What about the idea that there was testing on the sheath and the DNA went to someone else, another man's DNA? I think people call it 4 brothers. It was from Othram.
Yeah. Let's put this into perspective. If the Innocence Project got this case and did that test and came up with that result, it would be an exoneration to be popping corks, right?
Period.
That gives you all the information you need to know. I want to tell you something else, though. This is something very important, not related to this case, but related to it. I have worked probably 20 cases in my career where the
Sorry, I don't want to hear about other cases.
Oh, that lead?
You can't win if you do that.
All
That's
right.
the only
I
explanation.
think that's pretty much what the interview is. He says a lot of things, and there might even be more that we've already heard that we just didn't really catch and put it into perspective yet. So we might need to revisit this when more information comes out. But I do want to go over some pictures. Let's see. Hold on. Let me do this one first. Hopefully you can see it. Hold on. Let me put it up. Doobie doobie doo. All right. Let's look at these pictures. So this is the crock that he's talking about that clearly has blood on it. And they didn't take it. They didn't test it. They didn't even take it in evidence. Now, this to me looks like it's also possibly blood on this sink, the bottom part of this sink as well, which is interesting. Also, just in case anybody hasn't seen it, that's the crock he's talking about that was found in the 2nd floor bathroom that has blood on it that was never taken into evidence. Then, I wanted to show you guys this one because I feel like this is important as well. This, this is in the kitchen. This is a towel in the kitchen, in the corner, that has bleach all over it. And I just want to show you that it's there. And it was there from the moment the police walked in, and they never took it or tested it or did anything with it. And I think that it possibly could have something to do with the cleanup. I don't know. I mean, the house is a disaster anyways, but who knows? I just think it's weird that there's obvious signs of a cleanup, but you didn't take. At this point, it's on purpose, right? They're doing it on purpose. So let's look at these pictures. This is obviously the 2nd floor bathroom. These are the pants. This red part, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. There we go. There's a red part here on the pants. I believe it's like part of the tag, but these pants look awfully long to me. So like probably either Dylan's or even maybe Ethan's, but they look awfully long to me. And we have to think Dylan's on the 2nd floor. So this is the bathroom that Dylan would use. But they look long. I don't think that these would be Xana's at all. And my guess is probably Dylan's. And these are also the pants that Dylan's friend that was over, Lakeland, took a random picture of that night. What is with these jeans to where she's taking pictures of it and sending it to people? Why? Is that blood right here? I don't even know. It just don't even know. Okay. Let's look at maybe the other way. Because there's a picture on the washer as well. And I've always thought that that was blood. You can kind of see it. It's right here and down here. Look, another towel. So we know that in Dylan's story, she says, and I heard Kaylee run down the stairs right here. Blood. In my opinion, that's blood. There's Ethan's shoes that he was wearing that night. Right there. Wait, are the laces out of it? Hold on. Are the shoelaces out of Ethan's shoes that he wore that night? Because that would be wild. That would be like somebody's cleaning his shoes. Are there not laces in there? He had Converse on? I thought he had on the white, or was it just not that night? Oh no, he had, I'm thinking of the brown shoes he had on, not even these. I'm thinking of what he wore to the, what you call it? His sister's dance thingy. I was thinking he had these on, but he didn't. He had on brown, like dress shoes. Him and Hunter had on brown dress shoes. Okay, never mind. But yes, in my opinion, this is blood. But here's my thing. In Dylan's story, she says, and I heard Kaylee running down the stairs, and then I heard her go into the bathroom. How would you know it? First of all, if you weren't watching, how would you know where she went? She could have gone into Xana's room. She could have gone anywhere. I think that is Dylan explaining away why they're going to find blood in the bathroom. That's what I think. That's what I think. I think that is her being manipulative and already trying to explain away the blood in this bathroom. Kaylee ran to the bathroom and I heard her crying and I heard somebody say, it's okay, I'm going to help you. No, you're just trying to explain away why there's blood in here. That's it. We don't need to go through all these pictures. I just basically wanted to show where the crock and the blood is on the washer and everything like that. And I wanted to go through. I saw in the third floor bathroom something that caught my eye earlier. And I want to share it. I think we've seen this. I'm not sure if we've decided. Oh, I'm not even sharing the right page. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Un momento. This one. All right. All right. All right. All right. Right here. I'm pretty sure that we've all seen this, right? Looks like it could be blood, but I want to get to it. It's on the sink and it looks to me like it could be diluted blood, like somebody cleaned maybe a knife or something in this upstairs sink. Hold on. Let me find it. Oh, there we go. Right. And I could be wrong. It just caught my eye. Right over here. Right in this. Can you see the cursor? I don't know if you can see it, but right here on the left of this soap, it looks like diluted blood to me. It definitely has a pinkish red tint and it's on the wall. And I don't know all the way to the right here. I don't know if this is specks of blood, like diluted blood or not, but it's like a pink color next to the faucet. I mean, there's even some on the wall to the right. And you know, they didn't process this bathroom at all. It could be mold. It has like a pink tint to it. There's some right here, right over here. And then there's a drip. I mean, it's in the form of a drip, like it's a drip on the wall, and it's got a pink tint to it. So it's something. Not exactly sure if it's diluted blood, but it looks like it very well could be. It looks very similar to what is on the half wall on the second floor. But I didn't really notice much of anything else in here. Do you guys remember when there was like Kleenex in the garbage that had blood on it, like specks of blood on it, and that wasn't tested, which is crazy. See this dripping on the wall? I mean, doesn't it look like in the shower that it's still wet in there? Like somebody took a shower? Like obviously it wouldn't be 8 hours later. I mean, not necessarily that they showered right then, but I mean, this dripping on the wall looks like it could be there before, but I don't know. I'm convinced that there was a shower. Okay, dokie. I am going to share. This is Bronx's buddy of the day. This is Takara. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Takara, which is Japanese for treasure. And Jen sent me this. And this is a very close-up picture of the hummingbird that comes to visit her every single day. And she named it Takara, which means treasure. And I think it's really cool. The different species that everybody's sending in for Bronx's buddy of the day is really cool. Every little being should get our attention, and we are blessed to have them. Look at the little feet. Oh my God. I love hummingbirds. I think they're beautiful. Yeah, this is really cool. Thank you for sending this to me. I really love this. This is really cool. There's something majestic and peaceful to me about hummingbirds. So I really wanted to share this. It's really cool. The picture was further away. It just, I had it zoomed in and kind of unpixelated. So this is actually a real hummingbird. It's really cool. So thank you for sending in Takara, aka Treasure, for Bronx's buddy of the day today. We appreciate you. Do something nice for yourself today, guys. Be kind, but more importantly, be kind to your animals. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks to the mods and everybody who donated tonight. I appreciate all of you. Be safe, you guys. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you. We'll either see you tomorrow or Thursday. Either way, I do want to go live Friday. So we'll see you here sometime either tomorrow or Friday or Thursday. Have a good day, guys. Bye-bye. Whoops, hold on. One sec. I'm going to leave you with the song. Do, 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 do.
Yeah. 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 Bronx on the scene, nose to the ground, reads every scratch, every step, every sound. Dust on the boot, mud on the cuff, one wrong move and he calls you bluff. He found a lie in the turn of a face, found a fresh print in an empty place. Tail up high when the story won't blend, he don't bark loud, he just gets close. Damn, sniffing out facts, no room for slack. Truth in the crack, now we don't look back. BronxTails, 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 chasing truth through the rails. BronxTails, 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 corruption slips then fails, sniffing out facts, uncaging the truth, corruption on a tight leash, and he's pulling it loose. Hey, hey. Idaho nights cold, over the floor, 4 names heavy in the whole town, so Bronx in the weeds where the silence stayed, digging for proof in the tracks it made. He found the gap in the masked up tail, found the bent clue in the buried trail, bone white truth in the folder stack, one clean scent in the case swings back, sniffing out facts, no room for slack, truth in the crack, Now we don't look back. Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales. Chasing truth through the rails. Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales. Corruption slips then fails. Sniffing out facts. Uncaging the truth. Corruption on a tight leash. And he's pulling it loose. One paw print, one torn thread, one false alibi, falls dead. Bronx stays locked on, won't let go. If the truth has a scent, he already knows. Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales. Chasing truth through the rails. Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales, Bronx Tales. Corruption slips then fails. Sniffing out facts. Uncaging the truth. Corruption on a tight leash. And he's pulling it loose.